All right, here we go. Welcome to the movie discussion pocket dimension, where time does not exist and the only thing that matters is film. I'm Cole and that's Jay, and today we moved on from our recent series of the New French Extremity, and now we're just not in a series anymore for a while. Just going to do some one-shot episodes, and to get into the swing of things here on this December 11th is for 2006. Children of Men, directed and partially written by Alfonso Cuarón, and based on the novel of the same name, although I guess significantly changed in some ways. I never read the novel, but before this show I tried to read a bit about the novel itself, and it seems the movie makes some significant plot departures from it plot wise and a few other things, but it's one of those times where it seems like the movie has a lot better reputation than the book. And that's, I guess, the first thing I really think of now in late 2019 when I think of this movie from 2006. Is that this is one of those movies that, at least at the time, had an amazing reputation. It was really well received critically. And I feel like it's one of those movies that has sort of faded from the public consciousness in the last few years. But maybe I'm wrong, because again, when I was looking up stuff and reading about this, I found out like at least it hasn't faded from the consciousness of the initial circle of people, the critics that liked it, because like in some poll in 2016, it was rated in like, I don't know, something like 13th in like the best movies of the 21st century so far. So it's still very highly regarded. But I feel like as far as like maybe the general movie going public, it doesn't get talked about as much anymore. The other movie I always say that seemed to have that same feel to me was, and this was even more so because this movie was also a kind of a mainstream success at the time too, was back in 97, one of my favorite crime dramas, LA Confidential. LA Confidential was fucking huge when it came out because it was full of stars and glitzy. And the thing was, the critics liked it too. They said, this isn't just a popular movie, it's a really good movie. And I feel like within a few years, people weren't talking about it anymore, and now people seem to just, oh yeah, that was a movie that happened. I don't know. It's a movie I still really like, but I don't know. I feel like a lot of people forgot about it, or whatever they liked about it has worn off. It's a little different for me with this movie because this was a movie that like I don't think I saw for about 2 years after it came out. I wasn't part of the initial thing, and it's weird because also when I finally did see it, I didn't think that much of it, but it's a movie I've seen several times over the years, and it's one that I've gotten to like more and more as time has gone by. And I think it's also because of the way my own tastes have changed and the way I look at movies. Because one of the things I really like about this movie is something that I maybe wouldn't have looked at as much when I was a bit younger, which is really the technical aspects of this movie is something that I really like how it was shot and stuff like that, which we will get into. But it hadn't even been that long since the last time I saw it. But I don't know. It's just one that popped into my head recently when I was again looking over some of our lists and some of the stuff that I compiled and some of the things that I'd managed to record off TV to save for later. Even though it hadn't been that long, I did feel kind of in the mood for it. I can't really say why, but so that's tonight, Children of Men, and of course, again, we can jump ahead into this later. But Alfonso Cuarón himself has had a pretty interesting career. And with the exception of his 1991 directorial debut, I think Mexican movie. He's a Mexican-born director. I've seen all his work. I've seen all of his movies except for that. So that's something we can get into a little later, talking about some of his other films. Of course, most recently he's been celebrated for a movie that didn't even have a theatrical release. I don't think the Netflix original movie Roma, which got a lot of praise and again critical acclaim.
Okay, that was him.
Yeah, it's his most recent movie, but I've seen all his movies, and he's mostly done his own thing, but he has like one big foray into the mainstream, which is the movie he did before this, because he did the third Harry Potter movie. Don't ask me how that works, but he's the guy who directed the third Harry Potter movie, The Prisoner of Azkaban, which is interesting in regards to this movie, because it's like, so even before he did this movie, he had experience working on like a very British movie with like, a British cast and crew for the most part, because that's what this movie is, and obviously that's what Harry Potter was. So he already had experience working in sort of that environment. But yeah, I really and I do think it is one of the better of the films. The first three films, while maybe they aren't as interesting as some of the later films, plot wise and stuff, they're good because it's right before the books got so big that that they had to start cutting stuff out a lot and simplifying things and condensing things. So that's something that's really good about like sort of the third movie is it's the last time where they don't have to like make a bunch of huge changes from the book. So that's one reason why as Prisoner of Azkaban stands out too. It has really less to do with what, who did it and how they did it, and more just the fact that since it wasn't a super long book, it was right before the book started to get really long. So they were able to, film it fairly, obviously changes, but still film it fairly faithfully to the material without having to like eliminate a bunch of stuff, because the fourth book is really long and then they're all long after that, and as they were making those movies, of course, for the sake of time constraints and stuff like that, they had to do a lot of cutting. They had to cut out scenes, get rid of subplots, sometimes condense characters, stuff like that. But the third movies, yeah, it's pretty good, and to me it was sort of the first really great of the books. But I don't know how he fell into that, but anyway, we can talk about him in general later, because I do like his work. I do like his resume so far. But yeah, Children of Men. I can't believe 2006 is already that long ago.
I know, that's the same thing I thought.
I mean, this movie is almost 14 years old.
And we're only 8 years away from the year it takes place.
Yeah, and that's the other thing, right? Yeah, because this movie this is a dystopian future type movie, but it's very different from a lot of the others because it's a bit more grounded in reality than a lot of others. This movie is going to remind you of a lot of those too. Like it might remind you a bit of something like 28 Days Later, which actually isn't a future thing really. It's just an apocalyptic movie with that, but it feels that way anyway. It can feel a little bit like I Am Legend. Mm-hmm. It can feel a little bit like oh god, I know there's lots more, but anything like that, it can feel that. But this movie's a bit more muted. I mean, we still have a society that's coming apart and unraveling and full of chaos, but there's no monsters or zombies or anything like that. There's no horrific plague, and technology is also like basically on par with now. That this you have to give credit to their strength too. So this movie came out in 2006, set in 2027, and maybe it had learned from past movies that jump too far ahead and too quickly, like to realize that, okay, in 2027, which we can say is only about, less than 8 years from now, the world will be different. Things will have moved on, but it's not going to be a big, massive change. It's not going to be completely looking different. Like, the way they designed things and that, like, the cars all look pretty much the same. You have to look at them really closely to see how they're a little bit different. And then there's just some things like, besides the social stuff obviously is different. But as far as like technology and architecture and things like that, the main difference of this 2027 London is that stuff that already exists in today's world and even exists in 2006, like billboards with like electronic stuff. Now there's just more of them. Like there's more of them, and they're on more things, and they're pushing some really interesting stuff. For instance, this is a movie with great attention to detail, and there's all sorts of stuff you can find if you just pause it and look into the background, and we'll talk about that too. But I like the restraint used in this, because this is a dystopian future movie, but it's very grounded in reality. It's not Blade Runner. Not that
it's very believable.
I love Blade Runner, obviously, and it's very believable. And the way everything breaks down seems believable too, because it feels like if something like this happened, that's very, I think, what would happen in real life would be very similar.
Yeah.
So, of course, what has happened? Well, in the book, they tweak it a bit for the book, although it amounts to the same thing, which is people aren't having babies anymore. The human race seems to have not be able to breed, basically. And so this opens in 2027, and we open with a news report of the youngest person in the world dying, actually, by getting himself stabbed to death. He was 18 years old and a few months old, making him the youngest person in the world, which afforded him a certain celebrity status. And it says on the news report, he was stabbed outside a nightclub in Buenos Aires when somebody asked him for an autograph, and he spit in their face, and then they stabbed him to death. And then the person that murdered him was subsequently beaten to death by the crowd. So that's the world we're at now. There haven't been any births in over 18 years. And so it's literally a world without children. And society has broken down all over the world. Societies have collapsed, and I guess Britain is maybe the lone remaining society. I think they suggest that also where he was, Buenos Aires in Argentina, also might have had some semblance of order too. But apart from that, like, yeah, these are the only countries left that are still have like a government intact. Although again, it's very different. Basically, Britain has turned into a police state, very authoritarian, and given that all these other countries are in complete chaos and disaster, and there are things like sickness and war and stuff, you've got a flood of immigrants coming into London just because it's a bit more stable. And now all immigrants are legal immigrants. There's no such thing as a legal immigrant. Anybody that comes in is considered an illegal immigrant because they can't handle them. And that's a big part of this movie is, the state of how countries view immigration, which again seems very timely today, but it was timely back then too. And so there's all sorts of allusions and allegorical things to stuff in contemporary society too. But just speaking purely within the confines of the movie and not any sort of metaphors and stuff like that, yeah, that's the world they're in now. So England is still together, but it's very much changed, and there is still a lot of chaos. And of course, there's a lot of groups and terrorist groups and stuff that have their own causes. They're in conflict with each other sometimes, and obviously with the state. And that's going to play a big role in what goes on in this film. But yeah, I wrote down some of the stuff about some of the details, and we can get to that later. But so I'll just get back to the preliminaries. Yeah, go ahead.
I wish I had paid more attention to the minute details, like in the background and stuff, but I didn't think to.
The reason I did this time was because I'd already sort of heard about it again.
Oh, really?
Like before this. It's not like the very first time I watched the movie I caught them all. I didn't. It's in the years since stuff came out about how they did that. So yeah, I'll talk about that. But
yeah, I kind of had a similar experience with it. I remember it being, a decent amount of buzz when it came out, but it was probably a year or so later when I finally got around to watching it when a good friend of mine told me that it was really good, and I was kind of underwhelmed by it. And I rewatched it again about a year ago, trying to see maybe I missed something or feel a little different about it. And it's, I don't know what it is about the film. I know the pacing's rather slow, but I think it's like you said, it doesn't have monsters or zombies or, there's no plague. It's lacking that. And I think it's very realistic in that something like this could happen, and that's the way it would, go down. And that
it's very much about, the nature of humanity, right? How we will act towards each other in these sorts of situations. And again, it's very easy to believe because we're looking at a world now. We hardly live in a world of perfect order, but we live in a more orderly world right now, and yet it still has a lot of these problems, maybe not quite as dialed up as they are in here, but it's very easy. It's very easy to believe that kind of stuff would really spin out of control if that situation were to actually occur. So yeah, one of the tweaks from, I don't really makes a big difference, but in the book, it's stated that the problem without having kids is actually something to do with the men. It's like the men have all become sterile. They flipped that in this. They flipped it and made it to so that the women now, although it doesn't specify what the problem is with women. They're just saying now all the women have become infertile. And then a little bit later in the movie, there's even a reveal that it even happened with the last generation of people that were pregnant, because you find out stories about people that were pregnant, but then they're all having miscarriages. So it's almost like it's very incremental, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, I like how there's signs everywhere that says not doing fertility testing is a crime, or something like that.
Yeah, the movie has a lot of propaganda and stuff, and right next to that, there's a really good piece of graffiti, but I'll save that for later because it's a good note to end on. I don't know if you saw it, but I'll save it for the end because it's a good way to end.
Okay.
There's a lot of propaganda going on here. I especially like the part, like a lot of it, of course, the anti-immigrant propaganda, talking about like how they're all illegal and you had to report them and get rid of them and stuff. There's this great. The best one is when he gets picked up on the bus to meet Julian, and remember there's like a commercial for it playing on on monitors on the bus, but at first it opens like in the opposite way because it says like she's my aunt or my cousin, my sister, my father, and it's like they're all illegal immigrants, report them. Which is pretty funny. It's like, I don't care if you're related to them, they're fucking illegal. So yeah, that really hammers it home. But back to the preliminaries. This movie stars Clive Owen, back when Clive Owen was actually really a thing. Like,
yeah,
he was really a thing for a few years, right?
When's the last time he did something? I mean, I like him, decent amount.
I mean, at the time there was buzz. Not at the time of this movie, but just before around this movie, there was buzz about him being James Bond before it went to Daniel Craig, and he had the advantage over Craig because at the time I didn't know who Daniel Craig was, but I knew who Clive Owen was. I'm not saying he would have been a better Bond. I don't know. I don't think so. But I'm just saying he was very high profile. I can't remember the timeline of the first time I saw him. I know that I saw a movie he did in 2004 called Closer, but I most likely didn't see that in 2004, probably even 2005.
Is that the one with Natalie Portman?
Yeah, that's the one with Natalie Portman. That's the one that's like gut-wrenchingly awful because it's all about like relationships breaking down. Like that's what every plot is. It's like Jude Law's in there and Horseface.
So, yeah, Julia Roberts.
Julia Roberts. Sorry, that's disrespectful. but yeah, big cast. Yeah, and that was the same year. Also, 2004 was the year of Jude Law, right?
Yeah.
In 2004, Jude Law was in Closer, Sky Captain of the World of Tomorrow, huge flop, which I actually saw in theaters.
Me too.
The only time I saw it. He was in the remake of Alfie.
Yeah.
And he was in at least one other like thing.
Was that The Enemy at Your Door or something like that? Was he in?
Enemy at the Gates was a couple years before that. That's the first time I saw him. That's a good World War II movie.
That's a good one. Yeah.
Yeah, that was a memorable first date for me with a girlfriend way back when I was quite young. Kind of an awkward first date movie.
Yeah.
In a way, because we have to watch like that sex scene. But anyway, yeah, there was at least one other thing I think he was in 2004. But anyway, that's Jude Law. Getting back to Clive Owen, who actually in this movie. Yeah, there's just a few years from like I'd say 2004 to maybe 2010ish, where he was a pretty high-profile guy in some big things, and fell off.
I remember Sin City. He was in that one.
Right, he's in Sin City. That's 2004. Yeah, okay, that must have been the first time I saw Clive Owen, probably, because I saw Sin City in theaters for sure. So I don't think I would have known who Clive Owen was then, but that might have been my introduction to Clive Owen. I know he'd been in some things before that, but a lot of them were English. For instance, he's in the movie that is responsible for the phenomenon that would later become Downton Abbey, which is, what the hell's it called? Something Manor, no. 2001 movie. Oh, man. Hold on. Let's get this.
I didn't realize Downton Abbey was based on something else.
Well, it wasn't. What it was they made... this guy wrote that movie, which is driving me nuts that I can't think of what it's called. And now everything's going slow because I have too many windows open. I'm getting to it.
Julian Fellows?
Gosford Park. Okay, so he's in this movie called Gosford Park, which is a good movie. And what happens is, okay, so Gosford Park is about all the same things that Downton Abbey is about, right? It's about like it's about the differences between the classes in a certain time period in England and stuff about servants and all this stuff. And Gosford Park, and the whole thing was like somebody told him, the guy that wrote it, like, you could, like, if you want to, you could expand that into an entire show, and that's eventually what he did. So that's what it is. But Gosford Park was sort of the original. It's like people talk about a comedy of manners. This was like a drama of manners, and it really it exposes like another side that a lot of people hear from this part of the world, and also just living in this time frame. Like we knew that, you know, back in basically at the time between the two wars, one of my favorite times because of all the Hercule Poirot stuff. So back in that area, and a lot of these English manners and stuff, like just how detailed it was, all the hierarchy of all this, like these people with these big English manners that took like huge staffs. Like the only way they can maintain them was by having tons of servants, not like one butler and one housekeeper. No, a whole fucking fleet of them and cooks and everything like that. And it talks all about the hierarchy and how some people are above others and some people are below others, and it's very important that you don't step over the line and stuff. Anyway, Clive Owen's in that, and it's a very good movie, and that's 2001. So that I didn't see that in 2001, but I saw it, you know, around that time, maybe 2003, 2004-ish. And what's interesting about that movie is, as I said, like, I've always been fine at, like, movies that have, like, British people and listening to their accents. I understand them fine. Even in the harder things, like stuff like, it's a little harsher, like stuff like Train Spotting. Like, I'm fine. But the only time in my life I've ever really needed subtitles when people are speaking English was Gosford Park. Gosford Park is very difficult. At least I found it very difficult because it's full of different accents and dialects. Because again, the whole point is they're trying to show, the difference between these classes and stuff. But anyway, so he's in that. So that I think that's the earliest movie I saw him in, which is the only point I was trying to make. And of course, I was very long-winded about it. But that was actually directed by Robert Altman, which seems like a weird thing for him to direct, considering how fucking British it was. But anyway. The point I was making, like right now, 2006, this is right when Clive Owen is a fairly big star. Had done some high-profile stuff with some other high-profile people, and yeah, I don't know what he's really been up to in recent years. I'm sure there's probably something. And like everybody else, he was in some misses. Like around that same time, like he was in that god-awful King Arthur movie in 2004. Man, that's a bad movie.
He was in Shoot 'Em Up, I believe.
Yeah, that's right. That's 2007. So that's still part of that era, I'd say. But yeah, I have it up now. And the last thing I saw him in, which is also a flop, although I liked it, was the Valerian and the City of a Thousand Planets movie. I like that movie. And he's in that. And that's probably the most recent thing I've seen him in. Apparently, he's in that Gemini Man movie with Will Smith. But yeah, if you look at his output in 2010, like he's in movies, but they're not in movies that were like a big deal or a lot of people saw or talked about. But yeah, that I'd say, from about 2001, we'll say with Gosford Park, right up to 2009-ish, he was in some pretty big movies. Shoot 'Em Up's a fun movie. I mean, it's not very good, but it's fun. It delivers what it promises.
Yeah, it's kind of like over the top.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been a while since I've seen it.
Same here. He was in a movie I really hated around the same time called The Derailed. That was 2005. Man, I hated that movie. That also has Julia Roberts in it, I think. No, that's Jennifer Aniston.
Okay, I was going to say, I thought it was Jennifer Aniston. Yeah.
That's another reason I dislike it, because I don't like her. I don't like anything she's ever done except Office Space, and it really doesn't matter that she's in Office Space. Any person could have been there. I'm not going to pile on her, but it's well documented that I am completely unimpressed by Jennifer Aniston. Have no idea why she was ever popular or liked or whatever. Anyway, don't want to derail.
I disagree. Just for the record, I disagree.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
I can't believe you like her.
But she's done decent movies.
Like
was
what?
Was that movie with Jake Gyllenhaal?
I don't know.
I don't remember the name of it. I'll find it just a second. I was looking up the filmography of Clive Owen, and
yeah, me too.
Man, it's like nothing. I saw Blood Ties in 2013, but that was
I didn't see that.
That was a good. I think it's like a gangster film.
No,
I remember liking it. I don't remember much about it, but
yeah, when he showed up in that movie I saw not too long ago, I was like, oh my god, it's Clive Owen, because it had been so long since I'd seen him in anything. But anyway, he's the main character in this. The whole movie, it's one of those movies that does not jump point of view. It's his point of view. There's no meanwhile scenes. Everything follows him. I'm pretty sure. I don't think there's any scenes he's not in, are there? I'm pretty sure everything follows him.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah. So, yeah, this is very focused on him. And what's interesting is Julianne Moore is in this movie. And briefly. Michael Caine is in the movie. You would say those are the other two big names. And spoilers, they both die. And with Julianne Moore's case, she dies fairly soon.
Yeah.
Just fairly shocking. The first time you watch the movie, you think when they get hacked in the car that maybe one of the extra characters is going to die, but you don't think she is. And, she gets killed. So that's interesting right there. It really, I think it surprises most people. It plays with your expectations right off the bat. So, okay, so the setup beyond like this dystopian world in London. So we're in London, in England, the last country that still sort of has some infrastructure, but not much. Total police state, full of terrorist bombings and stuff like that, and cops and army everywhere rounding up immigrants and actually exterminating them. There's a lot of Holocaust stuff going on in here for sure. But besides that, so you've got Clive Owen, who we eventually find out was a former activist who fought against some of this stuff, even before the disease, or whatever you want to call it, the epidemic of fertility, because there were still some other problems, of course. And you eventually find out he had a son that died in on some sort of a flu epidemic or plague or something like that. So, so there was other stuff going on. He was an activist. His son died. He and his wife split, as parents often do when they lose a child. She kept fighting the fight as an activist, and he just tried to hide from it, I guess, and sink into normal life. And he's some sort of like bureaucrat or something like that, with some ties to the government. So he has a fairly safe, comfortable life. Relative to what's going on. Like, everybody has it pretty hard up, but relative to what's going on, he has a fairly safe, comfortable life. He's not somebody the government's going to target or attack. The only risk he's at is the stuff like the terrorism and stuff like that. So, and the whole thing is, of course, how he's going to get pulled back into the world about activism. And it's very much, once again, like so many movies follow the hero's journey, but his is a little bit I don't know if I want to say truer, but sometimes it depends upon how you define the hero's journey. Because in some of it, the whole point is, okay, you take a person living an unremarkable life, and some event happens, and they get dragged into a big thing where it's really important that they, achieve this goal. And the divide is, for some of these stories, that person is revealed to be special in some way. That's the case like with Luke Skywalker, because he's actually Anakin Skywalker's son, and he's powerful in the Force. That's the case with Harry Potter. He was living an ordinary life. He finds out actually he's a wizard. He's not just a wizard, he's the chosen one wizard, and stuff like that. Where in the case, this is the more mundane one, where it's, no, he's just an ordinary guy thrust into extraordinary circumstances. So I don't have a preference for how that goes. I'm just saying, sometimes it's good to see that one. We don't need to find out that Clive Owen is some chosen one, or that he has some amazing special skills or anything like that. No, he's an unremarkable person pushed into remarkable circumstances, and he's going to rise to the occasion. And it's cool to see. But yeah, so it's one of those movies that has like no real specific villain. It's just sort of the circumstances of the villain, and again, breakdown of society, blah blah blah, and humanity. So it's really humanity sort of fighting against itself, and we have got various parts of humanity at odds with each other, and that's the whole point. A lot of people say, like, the big message that you come away from this movie is sort of like one of hope. That it's like a hopeless world, it's an oppressive society, but what he goes through and what gets achieved in the end is sort of like brings sort of hope or light back to a dark world, which I can buy. It makes sense. And there's all sorts of parallels, again, to the hero journey and things like various religions and stuff, too, that we can get into. But, yeah, I was just going to say, as far as, since this is more of a, we'll try to find some of those details. One that I knew was, what is it? Oh, okay. It's like early in the movie, there's a shot where he's on the street, and you're looking straight down the street, and you can see buildings far in the distance. And one of the buildings is like this dome that's obviously a church. That's the real church. That's St. Paul's Cathedral. But next to St. Paul's Cathedral, you see sort of an odd-shaped kind of like angular spire going up. Now that, if you're familiar with present-day London, that is the tallest building in London. In fact, the tallest building in all of the United Kingdom, the Shard. But the thing is, the Shard did not exist in 2006. The Shard didn't even start getting built until 2009, and it wasn't completed until 2012. But they, I think they at least had plans for it. So this movie basically anticipates that and puts it right where it's supposed to go, and makes it look a lot like it actually looks in real life. So that's one, even though it's a really quick shot. Another one of my favorites is when there's a shot, again, maybe in the same scene, the street parts, where there's a shot of the cops, and they have those weird hat helmet things that British cops have, right? All the cops have this insignia on it. Now, in real life, cops in London that have that, they have an insignia on it that has I think it's like E2. It's like, so it's a capital E, then it's two I's, meaning two R. That stands for Elizabeth II, Regina meaning queen, right? But this movie, set in 2027, anticipates that she'll be dead, although here we are, almost 2020, and she's still alive and kicking, so who knows? But it anticipates she'll be dead, and Charles is now the king. So if you look at their helmets, they actually says CR for Charles Rex, for Charles King. So that's kind of cool. There's also there's a lot of parts in the movie where there's newspapers up on walls or in the background. If you freeze them, you can see various headlines. And one of them is something about Charles. It says something, there's like a pun about Charles needing to be thrown out, with thrown, Throne, or something like that. So that's another allusion to Charles now being king. What else have we got there? Let's see here. Oh, there's a lot of advertisements about designer clothes specifically made for pets, which I think is to imply that because children don't exist anymore, people are using pets as sort of like surrogate replacements for them. So now, like, advertising has had to adjust to that. So they're trying to bring up more options for people to like look care of their pets. There's also advertising for something that's clearly the same thing as Viagra, but it's called Niagara, which is kind of funny because Niagara is a much better sort of word, I think, really. But what else we got on here? Of course, this isn't really a background, but after they talk about that guy dying in the opening, he walks through London. There are several candlelight vigils to him and setups like in memorial to him. The world called him Baby Diego because he was the closest thing to a baby that the world had. You see a few of those. There's a lot of newspaper clipping stuff that I didn't actually see that I looked up later. Apparently, if you get the DVD, there's a whole special features option that delves into it to talk about some of the stuff about how to talk about the backstory of some of these things that we see that aren't explained in the film. There's stuff about how Kazakhstan was nuked by Russia. There's even something about David and Victoria Beckham celebrating their golden wedding or anniversary. They're still married in real life, aren't they? So maybe they'll get there. A few other things. Something about okay, we don't need all that. But anyway, so yeah, there's quite a few things that I think are pretty cool. But I really like the police helmet things because it's like it's a blink and you'll miss it thing, but it's a pretty cool thing, and it's very specifically British. Did I lose you, or are you still there?
No, I'm still here.
Okay, no, just it's doing that thing again where, like, for me at least, like your picture's frozen.
Frozen. Okay, yeah. I'm still hearing audio.
That's good. It should eventually correct itself. But yeah, so that's a few of them. So there's a lot of really cool little like details like that I like. But yeah, I especially like how they so well anticipated the shard. I mean, in a way, they knew the shard was going to be built. They knew where it was going to be built, but they didn't know exactly what it was going to look like. But apparently, if you compare it, it looks a lot the same. So that's pretty cool. So a lot of attention to detail put into like details that like sort of as a blink and you'll miss it type thing. But it's pretty cool, and I don't know, I enjoy stuff like that. It's the same sort of level of detail you expect from somebody like a Ridley Scott or somebody to put in. And I'm always a fan of that.
Gregory Hines.
Who's that?
Who would you like to see play the Clive Owen role?
In this movie? Oh, he's asked. I don't know. I thought Clive Owen was fine. I don't know. In a way, like, it's one of those ones that really doesn't call for any sort of specific actor because the very point of his character is he's supposed to just sort of be an everyman, right? He's not supposed to be particularly special or different in any way. I mean, as long as he's British or can do a good British accent, I think that's good enough. I mean, in the case of Julianne Moore, they never try to hide that she's obviously American. It doesn't really matter. It's not like Americans don't live in Britain. So anyway, yeah. So the setup, of course, for this movie is he gets pulled back into the world with her. She's saying they need him to use his connections in the government to get some like forged documents to move, because that's the other thing. It's very hard to move through various zones in England, even if you're an ordinary citizen, to help some, what he thinks is, probably another one of her crazy radical friends or whatever to escape the law. So at first he doesn't agree. They like kidnap him and throw him in a van and put the hood over him and give him the whole, terrorism shtick and stuff. But then basically he agrees to it because they're going to pay him a lot of money to do so. So he's got a cousin who's like a higher, has like a cushy government job. So he's fairly high up, and you see his cousin's been like pretty crooked because he's been like rescuing art by basically just keeping it for himself. And the whole thing with the son is kind of confusing too. And again, it alludes to something that's in the book that's not really talked about in the movie, but is shown but without being explained. Because you're like, okay, the son is in his 20s, so he's fairly young for this world, and he's clearly pretty fucking messed up. Okay, so in the book, the whole thing is these people that are in their 20s are basically consider themselves the last generation, so they call themselves the Zeds, right? And they lead sort of wild hedonistic lifestyles because they think they're the end of the world and nothing matters. So they like, fuck a lot and do drugs and stuff like that and get tattoos and stuff. So that's what he's supposed to represent, that he's one of them and he'd been living that life. But of course, his father, being like a government official or something, wouldn't approve of it and is, trying to rehabilitate him. That's why he's screaming at him about taking his medication and stuff like that. So that explains that a little better if you're a bit confused by what's going on there with the son in that scene. So he was a Zed.
Michael Caine.
And of course, the big reveal eventually is the girl that he's been paid to escort, because that's the other thing. He was only able to get their kind of papers that would need him to come along. I can't remember exactly the details, but she can't go herself. He has to go. Is eventually, after some stuff happens, we're jumping ahead here, is it's revealed to him that she is pregnant. She's the first pregnant woman in 18 years. And of course, not only is that a big deal for humanity, but it's a big deal in a lot of ways. And then there's all the implications and of course, various groups that could use the baby as some sort of symbol for their own cause, which is very much what runs through this with the group they get mixed up with called the Fish or Fishes or whatever.
It's basically like an anti-immigration group, right? Or anti, whatever the way they're treating.
Yeah, they're trying to stand up for the immigrants, right. For the rights. And it's another one of those cases where you see like people that have good intentions but are willing to do terrible things to carry it out, right? And this is really how it works in real life with, a lot of terrorists. A lot of terrorists, okay, sure, some of them have like crazy wackadoo ideas that are bad for everyone, but some terrorists have ideas that on the surface maybe aren't so bad, but in trying to carry them out, they're, willing to murder and do all this stuff. And that's the thing here with the Fish. The Fish are right, like the immigrants shouldn't be treated this way. For God's sakes, it's practically a fucking Holocaust going on here. But what they're willing to do to achieve that. And he even calls them out at one point. He brings up a bombing, and they say that was the end of it. We stopped bombing. It's like, well, you stopped, but you were bombing, and people were dying. And it's like they haven't gotten any better, especially when you get some more reveals a little further down the road. But that's the big thing here is we got this girl, an African immigrant herself, Key, and she is pregnant. And of course, there's all sorts of symbolism and stuff going on here. One, the fact that she's African, giving birth to the kid is very thing that, humanity supposedly originated in Africa. It's the birthplace of mankind. So now for the next phase, it'll be Africa again as the mother type thing. There's obviously some references to Jesus and stuff. She even makes a joke about it at one point when he asks who the father is, and she says she's a virgin. Of course, she's not. She's just joking about, a virgin birth type situation. Several times, including the first time when Clive Owen finds out, by the way, his name is Theo, he says Jesus Christ. Several times, people say Jesus Christ when they find out that she's pregnant or that there's a baby. So that's kind of funny because it's almost like the baby's some sort of Messiah or Christ-like figure. So there's a lot of that kind of stuff going on, which I don't mind. It fits. I never mind that stuff unless I feel like it's forced.
Yeah.
If you're just trying to cram it in, like, no. But if it fits, fine. I get it. It makes sense. Well, so I feel like that.
Yeah, it is. It is like a, answer to prayers type thing,
Very much. Go a little further. Those terrorists are called the Fishes, protecting the rights of refugees. It's kind of like a loaves and fishes type thing, you could say. Maybe that's where they got their name because they see themselves that way. A few times people even make the sign of the cross when they see the baby, which is something Catholics do. I know there's a few other things too. There's even a thing about a passage of scripture that I can't remember that mentions, of course, the line "children of men." Let's see here. Psalm 90, chapter 89, verse 3. Thou turnest man to destruction and sayest, "Return, ye children of men." So that's where that comes from. So yeah, a lot of biblical and spiritual stuff going on, which makes sense because once again, this is very much about humankind's destiny, as it were. Little deeper, little detour from all that. Just my own personal opinion. I know how I'm going to sound like, but I wouldn't care. The world would all go to shit anyway, and I'd care about that. But the situation itself, that we can't have kids anymore, doesn't mean anything to me. I don't care. Okay, mankind got to be around for a while, and now we're ending. We're not ending in fire. No one's killing us. It's just over. Like, that doesn't bother me. I don't think that's sad or terrible. I've never been one of those, like, but the difference is, but since it's not, I care about future generations because we're going to have them. But if we weren't, I don't care, is my point. But I do care about the future. Like, after I'm dead, I hope the world's a good place for other people. But yeah, but I mean, if I found out, like, right now, nobody of our babies were being born, I wouldn't freak out and lose my mind like society would. I'd be like, oh, okay, our run is over. It doesn't bother me. There's even a whole society right now that is trying to get mankind to do that. They'll never do it, but that's what they're trying to say. They're trying to say, okay, don't have babies anymore. It's time for us just to die out, and let the, like, I'm not gonna, because no one's gonna listen to them anyway, but I don't think they're wrong exactly. I don't know. I'm not one of those people that's like, mankind needs to end. I'm just saying, if it did, fine. It's kind of how I feel. And some people say that's very selfish. You got to live your life. What about people? But how far am I supposed to care? How far? You know?
I mean, you can't really defend the fact that there are too many people on this planet. I mean,
yeah,
we're well beyond, modern medicine and things have allowed us to not only, survive, but to live really long lives and such.
Yeah, and I'm only talking about something like it just happening in some sort of natural way. I'm not saying, oh, we need a cleansing fire. No, I'm not saying that. I certainly don't think we should have, like, genocide. I don't think we should do it like China did or anything like that. I'm just saying, if it got to there, I don't care. And part of it is, of course, that I don't have kids of my own, and I don't have any desire to. And part of that has to do with, like, of course, I'm not going to be one of those people that judges people for having kids. Having kids is a very normal, natural thing. I'm just saying, one of the selfish things that some people I think have about having kids is they want to have their name carried on. And I don't see why that matters at all. But anyway, that's a big deal. Legacy is a big deal to a lot of people, whether they admit it or not. Yeah. It doesn't matter to me in the slightest. Neither my sister or I have kids and probably aren't going to have kids. And, at least our parents aren't in our face about it going, oh, the family name. Like, they don't, whatever.
I'm sure they feel a certain desire for that. They're just not telling you.
I don't know. If they're running out of time, my sister's almost 40. I'm 36, so if they wanted to say something about legacy or something, they're running out of time to say it.
Yeah, I mean, I agree, but it's kind of a depressing topic. I mean, to think that, this is the end of mankind as we know it. So,
well, what I'm saying is, obviously, like we said, it's very realistic. It feels like if that was the situation in real life, it'd be a lot like in the movie.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to pretend I'm better than everybody. I'm just saying all those reactions, none of them apply to me.
Right.
Because I don't care.
6 months in, people would be rioting in the streets, man.
God, yes.
I mean,
some because they really did care, and others just to take advantage of a crazy situation, right?
Yeah, order goes out the window. I don't know. It's when shit hits the fan, man. Like our civilized, society, it goes pretty quick.
Right, and there's so many stories and movies to make that point, and so does this one. Whether it's Lord of the Flies or this or some other third thing that I'm not fast enough to think of. Of course, there are many. But yeah.
When Katrina hit and we were without power for like a week, people were like shooting each other over like bags of ice and stuff. Like it was crazy. Like
yeah,
just how quickly the
government like set people in to shoot looters, which is like illegal and unconstitutional. But they were like, "What will you do?" They were looting. It's like so even like the infrastructure breaks down, even though it's not supposed to. So yeah, that happens.
Martial law and all.
Mm-hmm. So the situation we got going on in this movie, of course, again, is outside. They make allusions to a few things. Apparently, some huge, I think, possibly nuke went off in New York City. I think they say something like that. The opening line in the movie refers to 1,000-day siege of Seattle. So what's going on there? So it's like chaos is fucking everywhere. There's chaos in Britain too, but it's a little bit more controlled than the other places. There's still a government in place. There still is a rule of law, but there's a lot of There's a lot of crazy type thing going on. That's a little, I don't know. I was actually going to bring up that whole thing about immigration, because that's kind of what's going on here. Of course, is we've got people from Central American countries that are fleeing terrible conditions and stuff, trying to seek asylum. So again, this movie was made before that really became a big thing, although that of course existed. But it's another thing that sort of parallels something going on right now. Is people fleeing countries from like humanitarian crisis and stuff and trying to get in, and there being a big kerfuffle about all that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the movie's interesting because like it doesn't necessarily try to make a big statement about immigration. It's just saying like how far it can go crazy, and obviously that's bad. And that's the other thing. Like we have these people that are supposed to be fighting on the side, saying, "What the hell are you doing? You know, you're exterminating these people just because their crime is they come from another country trying to be safe." And yet those people themselves are willing to do terrible things because they think the ends justify the means. And that's what really gets around here. Okay, so we might as well say what turns the movie around even more so is when it's revealed at the hideout after Julian's death at the hideout, where they're trying to figure out Julian had been the leader. Now they're gonna have a vote to see who the new leader is going to be. It's this guy, the guy that was in the car with them, Luke. Mm-hmm. And then the big reveal is Luke actually orchestrated that attack by the other group that got Julian killed. The whole point was to kill Julian, I think also kill Theo.
Yeah.
That way he could be the leader now of the group, and that way he could take possession of Key and her baby and use them as a symbol for their movement, right? So Theo overhears this and manages to get her and the midwife. We eventually find out she's a midwife. The middle-aged woman, managed to escape because he overhears that, and they go with him. So that's where the movie really turns, because it's like they're not just fleeing from the government and the police and the military, but they're even this group that's supposed to be helping them actually isn't trying to help them. They want to use the baby for their own purposes, and they're willing to kill the other people to get in their way. So really very much on the run. And it's a great escape too, because it's so different from most escapes.
Yeah.
Because at first it's very ordinary, but then they get caught or they get discovered, and then they have the car, but the car is a piece of shit and they can't get it to keep going. And so it's very suspenseful because they got people running down the road at them, and like the car is not moving. Clive Owen is out pushing the goddamn thing. You gotta give him credit. It's pretty brave. He's out pushing that car, and they're just like a few dozen feet behind them.
Yeah.
So one thing I didn't get clear, even though I backed up, it must be okay. So remember when they get attacked by that group before they know that the fish are involved? When they get attacked by that group, two guys come up on the motorcycle, and one of them fatally shoots Julian, which is kind of funny, isn't it? Julianne Moore is playing somebody named Julian. Yeah. But anyway, shoots her, and then they get up alongside the car again to shoot Theo. And he manages to door them with the car, and they go flying. So was that guy with the dreadlocks? He was one of them, wasn't he? He must have been, because he really, because he had like an injured arm, and he really wanted to kill Theo through the whole movie. Because there's never a point where you see him like take off like the helmet. Because when you see him on the motorcycle, they both have helmets on. You don't see their faces at all. But he must have been one of those guys, right?
Yeah, that's what I thought too.
Yeah, okay. Because
I don't think it explains it, but yeah.
No. But yeah, I guess you just piece it together, because obviously he really wants to kill Theo. And they do say the other thing, like before he finds out the whole thing, it's not him, but another guy gets yelled at by Luke or somebody, like, hide that motorcycle, because the whole point is, like, if they see the motorcycle, they might think that you were part of that group, which they were. But yeah, so that guy, Dreadlocks guy, he becomes sort of a nemesis, and he really wants to kill Theo, and he chases through. So of course the other character we haven't talked about yet is Michael Caine. Different sort of character from Michael Caine.
Yeah. You could say that.
So Michael Caine is a friend of Theo's. He was a political cartoonist. Now he's retired and he deals weed, which obviously would not work in this society too well. So he lives kind of off the grid. He lives in a hidden place off the grid, and he's very much sort of like the last. I mean, I'm trying to think of if he's like Michael Caine's age in 2027, like where does that make him born? Does that make him born in like the 60s, I think?
Yeah, He's giving off a '60s vibe, that's for
Yeah,
sure.
except because like at least nowadays, like right now, and even to a few years earlier, like baby boomers, right? The people that are baby boomer age, they were the people that were the hippies, right? They were like in their teens and 20s in the late 60s, early 70s, early hip. He's too young, but I guess he seems like one of those guys that feels like he missed the party. Because yeah, everything about him is 60s, right? He's playing like 60s music, stuff like that. You hear Ruby Tuesday a couple times in the movie, even though it's not the Stones version, it's somebody else's version. There's also some musical reference type stuff that I missed too. Because there's like one when he's getting off the bus, there's like this German song or something that has the same title that was like the what's the word I'm looking for? Like slogan or whatever they had that they used to put above like the work camps and concentration camps in Nazi Germany, which was like "Work will set you free." Like that song is playing when he steps onto the bus or something like that. I didn't know that. That's something I read and found out later. But obviously, lots of Holocaust type stuff going on in here in this crapsack world. You've got you've got this whole political situation where the way the country responds to a natural catastrophe is to use a persecuted minority group, use them as scapegoats, and then bring organized violence against them and round them up in prison camps to murder them. So that seems kind of familiar. That reminds me of something. Oh, okay, yeah, okay. So yeah, there's a song by the Libertines. Remember them? They were one of those hip bands from the early 2000s. Anyway, it's called anyway the Libertines, and the name of the song is called Arbeit macht frei, which is "Work will set you free," which was what they had at which was like the thing they had on the door of the gates of like Auschwitz and stuff. So there's some more Holocaust stuff for you.
I mean, that's such a stupid slogan because like they were death camps. Like they weren't labor camps. They were like, they just like they're going to kill you regardless.
Yeah, but they had that whole facade, right? From even the ones that weren't about work still had that facade. Even though like obviously people saw through it, like when they were getting the people in and undressing them and putting them in, they told them that they were showering them. They were like, those are showers for hygiene purposes, and then they gassed them, They could have just said, get in there, fuckers, we're going to kill you, because there's nothing they could do, but they still maintain the facade, the lie. Oh, we're not going to kill you, these are showers, just get in there, and then they gas them, so, I don't know. It's all part of sort of that, like, cognitive dissonance, I think a lot of those people that, like, a lot of those Nazis at the camps had, that way, because some of them were just evil fuckers, obviously, but others just had like that's this sort of mental gymnastics thing going on that makes it sound like, okay, this is necessary,
Yeah, I mean, it's real easy to point the fingers and say, you're a bad person, but if they didn't follow orders, they'd probably be in the same situation as the people they're killing. So, I mean, it's definitely a slippery slope.
Yeah. And yet, what's funny is like when they were doing like the Nuremberg war trials, like that was always like the excuse. It's like, well, somebody gave these goddamn orders. We have some of the people that gave the orders, and they were like, no, I was following orders. It's like, like you were giving orders. But
I'm seeing here in the trivia that Michael Caine based his performance on John Lennon. It's so strange. I was going to mention John Lennon just a little while ago. He mentions
John Lennon. He mentions Lennon and McCartney at one point, although I can't remember what he's talking about.
But yeah, I can definitely see that.
Yeah, it's kind of like John Lennon if he had lived to that age, what he might be like. Which is actually explored in the movie. Small spoilers for the movie Yesterday, that Danny Boyle movie that came out back in the summer. Because the whole point is, okay, this guy, he's like this failed musician, can't get anything going, thinking about quitting, and he's on his way back from a gig, and he like falls off his bike and gets like hits his head at the exact same time that there's like this power outage all around the world for a few seconds. And then when the power blinks back on, the Beatles don't exist. Except he remembers the world before it changed. And that's the point, right? And it's all about how he thinks, hey, I could be a star. And he starts like, playing Beatles songs. People think it's him, and he becomes this massive star, of course. And one of the things that's going on in there is he finds John Lennon. Because it makes sense. Because you could make the argument if John Lennon wasn't a Beatle, he'd still be alive today. Now, there's a million other things that could have happened to him, but it's at least possible because he did die as a direct result of being in the Beatles. Like,
Right.
there's no getting away from that. The guy who murdered him sought him out because he was a celebrity, because he was somebody that he used to admire when he was in the Beatles, and then when he was the solo artist John Lennon, he thought he was a phony and all this stuff because he was all obsessed with Catcher in the Rye, and he murdered him. So if John Lennon hadn't been in the Beatles, he would have just been some guy that nobody knew, and nobody would have killed him. So
Right.
they feature a 78 who would have been a 78-year-old John Lennon in the movie. He's just some guy who's just like living in a house alone. And it's kind of a surreal moment, but it's neat. I don't think it was in bad taste.
No, I think it's kind of cool.
It's just sort of like a what if. And there's a part like where you ask him, how old are you? 78. And he gets all teary. He goes, you made it to 78. You know, it makes him happy. I mean,
I still need to watch that. I remember you telling me about it.
It's a cute movie. It's not going to blow the doors off or anything like that, but it's a cute movie. Obviously, again, it helps if you're a Beatles fan. And Ed Sheeran's kind of funny in it.
Oh, he's in it? Yeah.
So Ed Sheeran's in it as himself, right? Because the whole thing is like eventually like this guy becomes a huge star. And in fact, I think he opens for Ed Sheeran at one point. And it's all about how Ed Sheeran can't like cope with the fact that this guy seems to be more talented than him. It's kind of funny because it's like Ed Sheeran like showing like he's super insecure that this guy just needs to like write way better songs than he does without even trying. Of course, he's not writing them. So yeah, at one point he even makes like that Mozart reference. He's like, now I know how like Salieri felt or something like that. Yeah, but he has some funny moments, like where they show it in the preview, which is kind of big. I hate when they do that because it's like one of the good jokes, and they use the preview where he's telling him, he's writing "Hey Jude," and he's like, "Why Jude?" And he's like, "Oh, I don't know." It's like, change it to "Dude." Hey Dude. And he's like, "Hey Dude, dude," and he's like, No." Yeah. So Ed Sheeran's kind of funny in it. But yeah, definitely worth seeing. That's Danny Boyle.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't realize he had directed it either.
Yeah. It's a cool little movie, but yeah. So there you do get to see a John Lennon at 78 years old, not married to Yoko either, because he wouldn't have fucking met her.
Right.
So anyway, back to this movie. I know we're probably missing things, but I'll just jump to sort of the next thing I like to talk about the movies. I like it from a technical aspect because I love how it's shot, because we talk about how real it feels. How it's shot helps that feeling, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because again, this is a movie that does not deviate in its narrative in point of view. It just follows Theo. So it feels less like a movie in some ways because there's no like meanwhile shots of like somebody off in another place doing something. All the scenes follow him. And the camera very much follows him. And I'm sure you noticed that the movie features several sequences that are like done in one shot. 3 in particular, one which is really good. The attack on the road, which was really difficult to do because the way they had to have the camera inside the car. So they're driving along in the car, and at first it's just an ordinary driving scene, talking a little about his past when he was an activist with Julian, and they're trying to getting to know each other, and then of course they get ambushed. But anyway, through all that, the camera doesn't. There's no cut. It stays in the car, and it goes out the windshield, and you see them get attacked, and now they're backing the car up and going in reverse, and now the guy's coming at them. All that is in one shot, and that's
cool. I didn't realize that was all in one shot,
and that was tremendously difficult to do.
Mm-hmm.
And some of these, and every time, and for some of these shots, they took hours to set up. And then they do it, and then maybe either they made a mistake or something, and they'd say, we're going to do it again. And then they take hours more to set it up again to do it again. I know for a fact the end one, the longest one, the whole thing where he's running through the city, that one took 5 hours to set up. And they did it more than once. So there's a lot of good technical sort of wizardry going on here, which I really appreciate of the single shot thing. So looking here, the car thing, let's see how long that was. The ambush on the road is 4 minutes and 7 seconds without a cut. And let's see what it says here. There's a whole thing. There was a thing here about sort of how they did it. This is just the Wikipedia page. Cuarón's initial idea for maintaining continuity during the roadside ambush scene was dismissed by production experts as an impossible shot to do. Fresh from the visual effects-laden Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, Cuarón suggested using computer-generated imagery to film the scene. Some producer refused to allow it, reminding the director they had intended to make a film akin to a raw documentary. Instead, a special camera rig invented by Gary Thielgels, I don't know how to say that name, of Doggycam Systems was employed, allowing Caron to develop the scene as one extended shot. A vehicle was modified to enable seats to tilt and lower actors out of the way of the camera, and the windshield was designed to tilt out of the way to allow camera movement in and out through the front windshield. A crew of 4, including the director of photography and camera operator, rode on the roof. So yeah, you're not thinking that when you watch the movie, but if you watch that scene, if you think that, you can understand like where the camera is and when they had to like move over like where the actors would have been in the way and stuff. It's pretty cool. They're doing all this while moving too, so that's really cool. So yeah, so the movie really does have that documentary feel, and of course, I'm sure you also noticed that in the longest shot, the whole battle in the city when he's running, which is over 6 minutes, there's a part where he goes inside, I think like a bus while they're taking fire. And somebody's blood spatters onto the camera's lens, and they just keep it there, which really sort of breaks the whole illusion of being a movie, right?
Suddenly, I like that a lot.
Yeah. And originally, we were going to take that out, and the cinematographer said we should keep it. Because that's one thing I tried to look up. I was like, did they even mean for that to happen? They didn't. It just happened, and then they were just going to take it out. And the cinematographer said, well, if you want to maintain that sort of realistic documentary feel, this is the best way to do it. I mean, I'm paraphrasing. I don't know what he said, but I'm just saying I assume that was his argument, and they decided to keep it in.
I've seen that exact same thing done a few times since, but I think this is the first time I ever saw it. You know, and it was not intentional, which is kind of cool.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I know you can't. It's really hard to shoot movies this way, and you can't do it. But I mean, it's great when you have a movie where you can at least do a few scenes that way, because it really does feel real. Like it's so much better, so much more organic. Especially when you have people like in a place like a car, where it's just all one shot, and you're just panning the camera around the car instead of cutting, because that does feel like a movie. I mean, I'm not saying a movie shouldn't feel like a movie, but you know what I mean. When you're dealing with certain sort of subject matter, sometimes it's better to approach it in a more documentary style way, because then it tells the story better and you feel more immersed in it, I guess.
Yeah, and it really seems like a thing of the past too. You don't really have directors that put that kind of work into their craft anymore, it seems like, because it is so easy to fix it in post, you know. Even when you have scenes that are supposed to be one long take, usually there are edits in there to make it look like it's all one take.
Yeah. And apparently that last sequence isn't actually all in one take, but they've managed to like use a few techniques to give you that illusion. But still, a lot of it is still, you know, shot for a pretty long take. But yeah, there's a few times where I don't mind them cheating like that. They did that in the movie Birdman, which I like. There's a few times where Birdman has some really long takes where they actually do cheat, but you can't tell.
That may be the one I was trying to think of. Yeah, I know there was one that it looks like one take, but it's edited.
Yeah. But it still has a lot of fairly long takes in it, right?
Yeah.
I do like a movie like Birdman, because to me that's acting, you know.
It's an ambitious film, yeah.
But and I mean, it helps that it has one of my favorite actors, Ed Norton, in it. I love Ed Norton.
I thought you were going to say Michael.
Michael Keaton's fine. Keaton. I mean, he's gotten more interesting as he's gotten older. I know you've heard me. I'm not a dump on him, but I'm not like an old school Michael Keaton fan. I don't like his comedies from back in the day or anything. Like, he's fine. I don't dislike him or anything, but I've never really been particularly into him. But he's gotten more interesting as he's gotten older. Birdman being maybe the best example for me personally. But yeah, those scenes between him and Edward Norton in that movie are amazing. I love them. They're great scenes. I always love seeing actors act within movies too, like acting within when you're acting. Like that's a whole next level stuff, which I really enjoy. Yeah. But so they cheat a bit in that one for that too. But still, they are doing some very long takes, which I appreciate, because again, it feels more like a performance in acting. And I know I've gone down this road and said these things before, and you can't apply it to every movie, right? You can't have certain movies, especially action movies, and just say, oh, we'll just do all long takes and we'll let organically and let the actors act, because it's not really that kind of story. It doesn't need that sort of presentation. But whether you're doing sort of like one long take like that, or if you're just sort of setting the camera, like I talk about with Ozu, I just like that, because it's really letting the actors act. They're actually able to express the emotions they're supposed to express and move the way they're supposed to move, or emote the way they're supposed to emote. Because sometimes I feel like even when movies like the actors are doing all that, then when you get the editing going, it kind of cuts into it and diminishes it. It must be frustrating, I think, for sometimes an actor feels like maybe he gives a pretty good, or actress, they give a pretty good performance in a scene, but then when they see the finished product, they feel like it's kind of like interrupted and cut up and stuff.
Yeah.
But again, I know you can't apply this technique to every movie. It's not going to work for every movie. It depends upon the subject matter, but I think it works very well for this movie. And as we said, like one of the things that really makes this movie stand out, especially from other dystopia-style movies, is like how sort of uncinematic it is in some ways and how realistic it is.
Mm-hmm. A lot of interesting cinematography too, like just odd angles and things like that. But I really like it's like got a dark tone to everything, except for, when he goes and visits, is that his brother? I don't know who that person is that he visits early on when he goes through the whole, has to go through a bunch of security to get in. And
that's his cousin.
Yeah. Like there, it's like nice and bright and, everything's, nice looking, but most of the film, in contrast to that is,
they're just trying to show, exactly. I'm making a contrast, right?
Right.
Like, his cousin is a fairly high up, like, government official. So he lives this sort of insulated lifestyle where he's away from, like, the dirt and grit and violence of the real world. He's insulated from it. He's in a bubble kind of thing, right?
And his son is playing some, like, weird, or he has some weird contraption on his hand that he's controlling his, I guess, we didn't have iPhones yet, but something similar to a little tablet.
Yeah, some sort of equivalent. But, and there's actually a lot of beauty to some of those things, right? I mean, I know that it's one of my favorite things, and I know that you can't love all of it, but I do like a lot of post-apocalyptic stuff, especially when it's not like way far in the future and everything's dust, but more like just like we're in the stages of decay and stuff. Like a scene I really like is so after they fled Jasper's place, Jasper is Michael Caine's character, after they made the plan. So they make this plan to help people along, whether we need to or not, I don't know. But they make this plan that in order to get to this boat they have to get to, the boat is actually called the Tomorrow, isn't that nice? To get her to this thing called the Human Project.
Mm-hmm.
Right, that's the goal, is to get her to these people because they'll actually help her and try to work on, analyze her to see if they can figure out a solution to the fertility problem. Right, it's like that's where they need to get her. They need to get her away from the government. They need to get her away from these radical groups that'll just use her as a symbol, whatever. This is where they need to get her, but they need to get to the coast to get to this boat. And the best way to get there actually is to go to one of the big internment camps. So Jasper formulates this plan where they're going to infiltrate the camp as refugees. And they're going to get in because there's this guard from the camp that he sells pot to that's going to let them do. That's what's his name? Suddenly can't think of his name.
Lem or Les or something like that.
He talks about himself in the third person too.
Yeah.
But anyway, so that's the plan. And anyway, so when they go to like this place to rendezvous with him. It's like this abandoned school. That's some of my favorite parts of the movie. I love like the walking through the school. Yeah. There's a nice shot of she's out in the dilapidated playground, sitting like on a swing, and there's just a little bit of sunlight coming in through the broken window. It's really nice. And I have to think that this influenced something like The Last of Us. You play the game The Last of Us. So much of it looks like that and feels like that. So I think this movie was influential, not even just on other movies, but I mean, that's a video game. I feel like there's at least a trace of it. I mean, this movie didn't invent that kind of stuff. It existed. I'm just saying it does a very nice job of it. And it's a really nice moment. But anyway, yeah, so that guy helps them infiltrate. And he's another example of, like, just people being terrible, right? He's only helping, like, he seems friendly at first, because it seems like he's doing it because he likes Jasper. It's like, yeah, Jasper's a nice guy. They don't have the heart to tell him that Jasper got killed. That's the other thing. How about the cruelty of Luke? It's one thing that Luke is, like, willing to do all this stuff, but the way he kills Jasper is awful. They're, they get away. Luke and his cronies show up. They say, where is he? And he won't tell them. He tries to pull my finger joke. He blasts him in the hand. Then he shoots him in the knee.
Yeah.
Then when he gets up and says, pull my finger, like, one more fuck you to him, then they fatally shoot him. Like, holy shit, this guy's as bad as the government, if not worse. Like, Jesus.
But It's not until he realizes there's a bounty on them, right? Until like he's helping him until that point.
Yeah.
So
and he finds out that both the government and the fish have a bounty on him. And he's like, well, here's a way I can profit, and that starts another of the one take or what seems to be long shot thing. It starts with after he finds out. And they've got the baby and stuff. Oh, by the way, the birth is another long shot, although that's an easier one because not much because it's stationary. But the birth is a long shot. That's about 3 minutes. But anyway, after that, he comes in, discovers the baby. Cut to them coming down the stairs. That's the start of it, and it lasts all the way to after Clive Owen just squeezes his way out that door at the end of the corridor. But the whole sequence where he comes down the stairs with them, he smacks the Romanian woman. The Romanian woman, who he's stupid to disregard, shoves him from behind. Then he gets into a tussle with Clive Owen. He gets the upper hand, but the Romanian woman comes back and starts beating him with like a bat or something like that. And then the others make their way down that hallway and finally squeeze their way through the door. All that's another single take, or at least made to look like a single take shot, which is really cool. But yeah, and he's still alive at that point. He attacks them again, and then finally, what's he kill him with? A car battery, I think?
Yeah, battery.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Pretty brutal, yeah. That's what Kenny was talking about in the comments earlier.
Oh, okay. Missed that.
I was trying to... Was it Irreversible? I was trying to think. There was a film we've done recently that did a lot of those really long, lingering takes.
Well, Irreversible definitely takes the cake for having a 11-minute rape scene.
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah. Not necessarily just the rape scene.
That doesn't do any, cuts or anything. That just puts the camera there and goes for 11 minutes and only just moves the camera around, but no cuts or edits or anything. So that might be the most recent film we did that does that. But yeah, I know we've done one or two other films that have some long takes in it too that will occur to me later.
Well, I guess Elephant may take the cake because it's...
Oh, right. Elephant's definitely the ultimate one, right? Mm-hmm. In fact, yeah, this movie's very reminiscent of Elephant in a way, in that a lot of the time the characters are traveling and the camera's behind them as they make their way places. And Elephant, that's pretty much like 90% of Elephant is the camera following characters as they make their way from one place to another.
I think people are trained, quick cuts are they're the norm now. So I think people think a movie's boring if it does that. But I love the long, lingering shots. And, in this film, it's got action going along with it, so it's not probably not as noticeable. But, if you look at the... Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, yeah, there's definitely a certain type of person that's going to get very impatient with a film like Elephant. Because sometimes they're just, walking across the quad or something like that. And, people are saying, why do we have to watch this whole walk?
Right.
But to me, it helps establish sort of an aura of realism. And it also helps establish kind of a little bit of suspense in a way because we know some stuff's coming. I mean, a really good classic example of that is Halloween, right? So in the original Halloween, there's that whole thing where Laurie's been babysitting and she has no idea that Michael's out there. He's killed anybody. And then finally, when she's trying to call her friends and she can't get a hold of them, and so she looks at the house across the street where one of her other friends had been. Mm-hmm. And then eventually, after looking at it for a while, she walks over. Mm-hmm. And the whole thing is filmed. And she doesn't walk over quickly and she doesn't run. It takes about 2 minutes for her to walk from one house to the other. And nothing happens. But it's really good.
But sometimes you need that, though. I mean, you need that, to set the pacing. I don't know. You can look at the statistics on the length of a shot without a cut, or how many cuts are in a single scene and stuff. And as time has gone on, it's more and more and more. And we're now it's seconds in between a cut, and films. For the most part.
Yeah, I think we've actually finally started going in the other direction.
Good.
But this was in the era, the early 2000s, especially, where the average length of any cut was 3.3 seconds or something.
I don't know. Sometimes it's nice to sit back and enjoy, shots like you were talking about in Halloween. I think it sets it up for later on. A little bit of anticipation. Tension building.
Oh, by the way, I saw a question in the chat there about have I seen The Spanish Prisoner. I guess you mean the David Mamet film. No, but I read a thing about it years ago. I can't. It wasn't like a script. It was like some sort of weird tree. I don't know. It was something I was reading about David Mamet, and then there was like this really long thing about The Spanish Prisoner. So I kind of know some stuff about it without having seen it. But I mean, I am a fan of of him, and it has Steve Martin in it of all things, which seems kind of weird. So I don't know. I'd like to see it at some point. I have to say, him bringing it up is weird because it's like probably the first time I've thought about it in at least a decade. But I don't know. I probably would like it because I mostly am a fan of David Mamet's kind of stuff. You know, he's not everything, but I would say this was still in the era when he was writing pretty smart stuff. I mean, that's usually what the thing that comes to mind, right? When you're thinking of like his sort of like, how do you describe David Mamet? Well, his smart and snappy type thing. Some people say that about like, who is it, Steven Soderbergh or whatever. I don't know about that. And I know a lot of people like, what's that other guy, Aaron Sorkin? People, I feel like Aaron Sorkin spent his whole career just trying to be David Mamet, but what do I know? Maybe I haven't seen enough Aaron Sorkin to really judge because he's more of a TV guy, so I don't know. But anyway, to that question, no, I have not seen The Spanish Prisoner, but it's definitely a movie that I would be interested in seeing, but I just hadn't, I don't know, hadn't thought of it in a long time or anything, but it sounds like something I would probably dig. Just for that little aside there, because sorry, I do try to answer questions. It's not always easy. Sometimes I'm right in the middle of stuff.
Right. Oh yeah, Kenny mentions that it wasn't released properly. I think he's talking about it. He said earlier that it was released too late, but I think it was released on the 22nd of December in America and the 25th in the UK.
Christmas, like I said, it had a Christmas Day release somewhere. I can't remember where. But yeah,
I think it was the UK.
Because yeah, this is one of those movies that actually didn't perform too well at the box office, despite the fact that it had a lot of critical acclaim. It says on Wikipedia that its budget was $76 million, but it only made $70 million at the box office, so that would technically make it, I mean, a light flop.
It's kind of surprising because, I mean, there was an awful lot of buzz about it.
A lot, yeah.
I mean, it was, I guess, critically acclaimed, but not, didn't translate into money.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, it's unfortunate, but that's sometimes how it is. Probably a film that gained more as after a video release.
Sure.
Gained more popularity. Yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting time to release a film of this nature. I don't think people want to see depressing stuff like that around Christmas. I don't know. That's just me.
Yeah. I mean, the movie does end on somewhat of a hopeful note.
Yeah.
But you're right. A lot of the movie is a fairly depressing ride. And I think, of the movies I've seen on Christmas Day, they weren't always the greatest movies, but they did always sort of have, usually they were sort of like adventure type movies or something like that. I remember from when I was a kid, it was never part of Christmas. But when I got older, it became a thing. First, when I first started dating, I did it a couple times. And then just a few years later, it was something I incorporated in my family, or my mother and sister and I would go to see movies on Christmas Day. I think the first time I actually saw a movie on Christmas Day was I saw Ocean's 11 in 2001 in Christmas, and that was on a date. That was actually the same girl that I had been dating later. Wait, that's 2001? That can't be 2001. Ocean's 11 isn't 2001, is it?
It sounds about right. I'm not sure.
Maybe I'm wrong about Enemy of the Gates, because I'm going to say it's the same girl I saw Enemy of the Gates with, but I saw Enemy of the Gates first. So, yeah, I've got one of those turned around, because I saw Enemy of the Gates with her in spring of that year, and then at the end of the year on Christmas Day, I saw Ocean's 11. So I'm pretty sure Ocean's 11 is the first movie I saw like on a Christmas Day, and then I think I did that a few more times with maybe a girlfriend or something. But then a bit later, maybe in the mid-2000s, it started being sort of a tradition between my mother, sister, and I.
Yeah, it's nice to be able to do that, but I don't know. It kind of sucks for the people that have to work there. Yeah. I don't know. I feel like
I don't know. I've actually had conversations with some of these people about that, and most of them are fairly young and don't care.
Sure.
I mean, it's one of. I mean, most of the people that work at theaters are pretty young anyway. But it seems like one of those times where if you have older people, you could allocate it so that maybe the older people that have families, they don't have to on that day and give it to the younger people. I don't know. I might go to their. That's the other thing. My mother was saying like it's just me and her this year. My sister is having one of her years where she saw up with her husband's family out west, and she's like, we could see Star Wars on Christmas Day, and I was like, I'm not waiting till Christmas Day to see Star Wars. Like we're gonna see Star Wars maybe like on the 20th or something. I don't want to wait, but anyway.
Oh really? You're looking forward to it that much?
I don't know. I'm in a real Star Wars mode. You know, I've been watching other things lately and stuff. And I don't know. We're not going to go into a big thing about it, but I'll just say I liked The Last Jedi. You know, I didn't think it was amazing or perfect, but I don't. But people seem to really hate it, and I don't get it.
Have you rewatched those, the newer films too?
I rewatched that one, but I haven't been able. But the one I haven't been able to watch the other one, the first one, The Force Awakens. I haven't been able to watch that or Rogue One. And I really want to see Rogue One again, because that might be the one I'm most sort of conflicted about. Because there are things about Rogue One I really like, and then there's things that I think are kind of flat and not needed type thing. But there are aspects of Rogue One I think are really good. It's something about Rogue One doesn't come together as a whole for me. But it has some positives that I think are really good positives. So I don't know.
I like Rogue One in that it's separate from the others, and that it's new characters. And it's in that same universe, but not necessarily dealing with the same stuff. You know,
I mean, I was certainly happy with the casting. I was happy, like I know that I've bitched and complained, and sometimes it's arbitrary, right? Like, okay, we'll say like Solo. Solo's one of the ones I watched recently. Solo's fine, I guess, but just in my own personal opinion, and I have no real reasons to back this up, I don't like Woody Harrelson in Star Wars. I find him distracting and out of place. I will say, conversely to that, in Rogue One, I was super happy to see Mads Mikkelsen and Donnie Yen in the Star Wars universe. That makes me happy that they're there.
I mean, I just wish they wouldn't use such known actors because, like you say, Woody Harrelson, it takes me out of it, you know? Like, that's Woody fucking Harrelson, you know? He's been in everything.
Well, that's the other thing about Rogue One, right? Like, I mean, Mads Mikkelsen's fairly well known, but, like, the rest of the cast, not really at all. So you can just get into their characters. You're not going to say, oh, that's what's-his-name from what's-it,
right.
You know?
Forrest Whitaker.
Yeah, but he's not that big and important, right? He's there, and you're right, it is kind of distracting, but he's not. He's only there for like a scene or two. He's not one of the core team or whatever. Like that core team, like I know that I'm bad because I'm bad at faces and TV, but I didn't know those people, so and I thought they were all pretty cool, and some nice diversity too. I mean, if we're going to talk about it, I know everybody wants to bitch about forced diversity in Star. I don't know, it makes perfect sense to me, but anyway. Not going there. Anyway, like I said, Rogue One doesn't come together as a whole for me, but there's a lot of stuff I do like about it. So that's the one I really wish I could watch again before this. But anyway, but yeah, it's still on. The other one is still on Netflix, so I was able to watch that. Both, yeah, for me, Solo and Last Jedi are both on Netflix, so I watched those.
So they're probably gonna be taking those off soon, don't you think?
Yeah, because everybody said, well, as soon as Disney Plus shows up, they're gonna yank all that. It hasn't happened yet. That's the other thing. I think probably starting on Boxing Day, I'm going to buy 1 month of Disney Plus to try it out. It's $8.99 for a month in Canada. I'll do a month because why not? I'm going to have time to watch a lot of stuff anyway, and there's a lot of stuff I'm excited about. We're getting really off track, but you saw me in the chat we were talking with Eric about some of those Disney things, and like I'm kind of obsessed with the package movies because I've never actually really seen them start to finish. Oh, I recently finally got to see Fun and Fancy Free, and it's so weird. Okay, I'll very quickly say, this is nothing to do with the show, but it might be interesting to some people. So, okay. So I had Family Channel back in the early 90s, the pay channel, blah, blah, blah. It was kind of like what Disney Plus is now. Of course, it was just a channel. It wasn't, but it actually had real Disney content. That's how I knew it growing up. All those classic shorts of, Mickey, Donald, and Goofy from the 40s, 50s, I've seen them all of them. And I've also seen, and I've seen lots of some of their weird, obscure movies that people don't remember, like The Black Hole and The Apple Dumpling Gang and The Cat from Outer Space and, the Herbie sequels. All that. I saw all that as a kid, and it was great. It wasn't all fantastic films, but, they were memorable and fun and good stuff for a kid to watch. Here's a question. Does Disney Plus have either version of the Mickey Mouse Club? Because, man, I was way into the 90s Mickey Mouse Club. But anyway, my point is, but besides that, so Disney back in the 40s during World War II, because one, they didn't have very much money because they hadn't had too many successes. And two, with World War II going on, a lot of their key personnel, including a lot of their animators, were actually involved in World War II. They were drafted, they were serving, etc. So they didn't have the budget or talent to make what they wanted to make, which is full feature length animated films. They were the only people in the world doing it at the time. That's what they wanted to do. So in the 40s, they released several package movies, which were just basically movies that were like several shorter animated sequences, in sort of like an anthology type thing, sometimes with a framing device with live action holding it together. So the first couple, actually, Make My Music and The Three Caballeros, were basically part of some weird government initiative called the Good Neighbor something, which was all about improving relations with the Latin American countries. So that's why they're all about like those countries, and that's where the Three Caballeros come from. The parrot is from Brazil, and that rooster is from Peru or something like that. And all those movies are set there. That's why you have a short of Donald traveling to Lake Titicaca on a camel. But anyway, my point is, I've seen sequences from those movies on Family Channel, but they only showed them out of order and in sequences and just sort of randomly. That's how I saw things like the thing about the operatic whale, that's in one of them. Like, I just always thought that was a short that stood on its own. But no, it was part of one of those things and stuff like that. So I've seen a whole bunch of them, but never Casey at the Bat, all these things. But I want to see them as the package movies. And not too long ago on TCM, they finally showed one of them, Fun and Fancy Free. Fun and Fancy Free includes, most notably, Mickey and the Beanstalk, but also had something about some weird bear. But anyway, Mickey and the Beanstalk was one that I knew really well, because not only did I watch it as a kid on Family Channel, but I actually taped it. So I saw it many times over the years. But what's weird is when they showed it on TV initially in the 50s, because it's the 40s, and this is the version I saw, they changed the narration, because Mickey and the Beanstalk was originally was a story told with a narrator. But the way I saw it was a fairly sort of straightforward narrator. You don't see him, he talks, he says some of the stuff that's going on, etc. But originally, when in the movie Fun and Fancy Free, that movie is presented with a framing device of live action, a real life guy who was actually a very famous entertainer at the time. He was a ventriloquist, and with two kids, and he's telling them a story, and he has a dummy with him who also chimes in. So the original version of Fun and Fancy Free is him telling that story to the kids, but also the ventriloquist dummy chimes in with observations and jokes during it. And I'd never seen that, so it was really different. So anyway, that's the whole thing. So anyway, apparently all those package movies, except for Song of the South, for obvious reasons, are on Disney Plus. So I'm really looking forward to watching them as they were originally presented, because I've had a fascination with them, one, because I've never actually got to see them all the way through, and also because they were just sort of a temporary thing, and people who know me well know I'm kind of obsessed with things that didn't last. Whether it was that 2-album period where the band had a different lead singer, or was when Ben Reilly was Spider-Man, or when Jean-Paul Valley was Batman. I love all those things and try to collect them. And that's kind of how I feel about the package movies. They were just sort of a weird, brief moment in Disney history where they kind of had to make do with what they had, and it made some interesting stuff. Anyway, so that's a huge, long thing for me about that.
So that's the kind of stuff you're looking forward to watching on Disney Plus?
The classic stuff, yeah.
Yeah. You mentioned like Mickey Mouse Club and stuff. I don't know why they wouldn't eventually put that on there. They've got that in the vault somewhere.
Yeah. I mean, that's got to be a lot cooler than... It's funny, we were talking about Generations before the show, which ties into a little bit. I remember, just before Disney Plus launched, a whole bunch of people, all on Twitter, I'm going to watch this and that. Like, I don't know how I got in my feed, but it was obviously some sort of, maybe you want to say millennial or whatever, was saying, I can't wait for Disney Plus because I'm going to watch. And then she named all this garbage that I would never watch.
Carly and
yeah, she was like, even Steven, Montana. Like, it was just all that. That's So Raven, Wizards of Waverly Place. And I'm just like, ugh. Because to me, that was the ruination of Disney. Like, Disney had gone from actual quality to junk like that. But some people, they're of a certain age where they think that's great. And I don't want to tell them they're wrong, but they're fucking wrong.
That stuff's available like on the Disney app. Like, you don't even need a subscription to watch that stuff.
Yeah,
that's commercials, but
I get a channel called Disney XD, and it pops up all over on that channel.
It's not like stuff that they haven't released anywhere in years.
I mean, sure, whatever. I'm going to watch The Mandalorian because I'm in a Star Wars mode, and people say Mandalorian's good. But I'm really excited about the classic stuff, and especially some of the classic stuff that I never really got to fully see, or just some that I saw so long ago that I can barely remember it, stuff like that. But yeah, why don't they put the Mickey Mouse Club on there?
I never had the Disney Channel for like extended lengths of time. Like they would do like free weekends and stuff.
Mhm.
I don't know why my parents were so opposed and not getting that for me, but
And I loved their animal movies. Nobody loved animal movies more than me. Like I watched so many animal movies where like there was barely any dialogue.
like
It
the
was
documentary style.
those and just the weird wacky adventure ones too.
Yeah.
Like Benji the Hunt. I love Benji the
Mm-hmm.
Hunted. God, that gets me every time, and I haven't seen it in a million years. I remember there was some whole that like there's some weird thing where like Roger Ebert and Gene Siskel rip into Benji the Hunted for some goddamn reason. Like why? What's wrong with Benji the Hunted, you bastards? Like you guys are evil. But anyway, yeah, so there were a lot of movies like that. There was a movie called Nicky, Wild Dog of the North from like the late 50s, which is all about like this half wolf dog that's separated from her owner in the north, and it's for a long journey, and she makes friends with a bear, and there's no dialogue except for maybe a narrator, and it's so amazing. I just love stuff like that, man. It's too bad that like a lot of those Disney nature documentaries were really super fake,
Right.
but
you find out like 27 dogs were killed in the making of this movie and stuff.
Well, I think, yeah, like almost that bad for some of it. I think that's where the whole lemmings thing came from. Like for some documentary, they like they put a bunch of lemmings go over the cliff, and everybody believed that was a real thing. Like, great job, Disney.
It's still a reference.
Yeah.
What am I? I'm not going to be a lemming, or something like that.
That was a cool video game on computer game. You remember that in the 90s, Lemmings?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That was one of the good computer games. It's fun. My favorite computer game from that era was Lost Vikings. Love that game.
Are we talking like shit? You died of dysentery, like the Oregon Trail type games, or is that
not that old? Not that old. This is more mid '90s. I played games that old too, though. Yeah, for people who don't know, I've always been a big. I'm not a PC gamer in any way, shape, or form, but I was in the '90s. I actually played a lot of PC games in the '90s. I just never. Once we got into like actual good graphics, I couldn't, afford it or handle it anymore. It's like Half-Life. I can't get Half-Life to run on my piece of shit computer. Buy a new graphics card. I'm not buying a graphics card. But yeah, basically the mid '90s. Doom and Lost Vikings and all this. The very first video game system I owned technically was a Commodore 64. I owned that before I owned an NES.
Did you have the tape drive? The cassette tape that would play games?
I don't think so. It was all floppy disk. I just had tons of pirated games on floppy disks. and these were the primitive games, right? With like stick figure graphics and stuff. But I played the shit out of a lot of them. Bowling, where the ball just goes up and down and you hit the space bar to make it move, all that stuff. I remember there was a Summer Olympics game. I remember the day we got the Commodore 64. As far as I know, it's the first video game I ever played was a game called Warp Rangers, which was just a space, a spaceship shooting game that I played on the Commodore 64. That's the first video game I ever played. Remember it all these years later, because I remember when we got like our first couple computers. Like, I guess computers were so different back then. Like, we didn't just buy a computer and come home. There was like a guy that came with it that set it up for us and told us how it worked. And that's what it was like with that. He showed us Warp Rangers. And it was the same thing when we got a 90s computer and stuff. And then I remember the day we got the internet, the guy came over sometime in 96. The guy came over and explained the internet and blew my mind. I was like, wow.
Yeah.
Old dial-up.
I can't remember the first video game I played. It may have just been like Mario or Duck Hunt or something on the original NES.
Obviously, that's the first console game I played.
Right.
Like a lot of people of my generation or age group, that's the first console game I played. Was Mario.
We didn't have my brother had a computer, but I didn't have one. So I didn't never really.
We didn't
played
get
Oregon
NES
Trail.
for years. Like I first played the NES at Ryan's house. We didn't get any. The Super Nintendo was already out when we got the NES, and we didn't get the Super Nintendo was out for like another 3 years before we got the Super Nintendo. But after that, I started getting the ground floor. I got a PlayStation very early. I got a PlayStation in like early '96. Like it had been out in Japan for a few months, but it had only just come out in North America when I got the PlayStation.
Like November or something when it was released.
Yeah, something like that. I got it, I think, in the US too. I think I got it at a Toys R Us in maybe Bangor, maybe something like that. So yeah, technically my PlayStation's American. My PS1.
Yeah, I was checked out at that time. I did play quite a bit of PlayStation, but I didn't have one. I skipped that whole generation of consoles. Played them. I played, a lot of the, was it Sega Saturn?
Yeah.
Is that the same?
Yeah. I have to say, it's not maybe the generation I like the most, but it's the one I'm most interested in right now.
Mm-hmm.
Is what's known as the 5th generation.
It's very interesting time for games.
That being the Sega Saturn and the PlayStation and the N64. That's the 5th generation of home consoles. And I was always interested in between the 4th and 5th. There was always what people sometimes call the 4.5 generation, which was the failed ones, the 3DO, the CDI, the Jaguar CD, and the Jaguar, right?
Okay.
And people have already heard me say this a million times. Like, the number one system I want to buy, I just want to throw money down on eBay, is for a 3DO. God, I want a 3DO.
Man, like 10 years ago, you could have probably found one for $1, before this retro gaming.
Now they're like $350.
Retro gaming is such a huge thing right now and has been for a while.
Yeah. I was always into retro gaming because I was one of those few people that never stopped playing my old games. I wasn't the type of person that put away an old system when I got a new one. I never sold or gave away old games. I always played that. And as I said, it's funny, I had checked out after my robbery in 2005. So there was a period of about 3 years, I'd say between 2005, 2008 or 9-ish, where not only was I not playing new games, I didn't even know what was coming out. I wasn't on the internet or looking at it or anything like that and stuff like that. So all I did was play older games because that's what I had.
Yeah.
See, I would love a Neo Geo. That has the longest lifespan of any console, by the way.
Yeah.
That had 12 years they made games for the Neo Geo.
I think that was everyone's dream to have one.
I have a lot of Neo Geo ports on both my PS4 and my Switch. I've got because they're available to get digitally. I have quite a few of them just because I'm obsessed with the system. So yeah, I've got about 7 or 8 Neo Geo games, but I've never actually played a Neo Geo. Apparently, in North America, the Neo Geo, wasn't available to the home market at all, but you could play it at hotels. Isn't that weird?
It was available. It was like $1,000 at
eventually. But it wasn't only because of demand. It was only available to hotels at first in North America. And what's fun is, even if you got one in North America, you still had to import the games, and you'd have to pay like $120, which is even more now. I'm talking about $120 in 1993, which is God who knows how much now, just to get like a game. As I said, like, it was always my dream to, again, I was a kid, I was reading EGM and all this stuff. I was obsessed with like importing a game. And of course, my parents already did so much for me. How could I explain to them that I wanted them to import me a game that probably wouldn't even work? So I was very excited a couple years ago when I got the Nintendo Switch, because Nintendo Switch is the first system with no region restrictions. And I did import a game. It's called, it's a game you can only get, and it was worth getting because it's a game that didn't have a physical release over here. It's called I Am Setsuna, sort of an old style throwback RPG, kind of like a Chrono Trigger type thing. You can get I Am Setsuna over here, but only digitally. You can't get the cartridge and box and stuff. But I imported it from Japan and I got it, and it's great. And of course, it plays in English. So
that's cool.
So that was sort of like a lifelong dream for me to fulfill, to finally import a game. Made me so happy. I'll do it again at some point when I've got money maybe to throw around.
Yeah.
But,
during that period of time, like the early 90s, that was huge. That was like the biggest thing in my life was games. Yeah. Games and comics. And I remember our Toys R Us, like, contrast to, a few years ago before this Toys R Us closed, permanently. Same one I went to when I was a kid. And, it was a huge game section. At the end, it was hardly anything. I mean, I think they still sold games, but it was like nothing. Like, it was a huge display, and they had all the systems, set up that you could play, and, you could actually see what it looked like. It was like under a glass case. I
kind of completed the circle. So I got my PS4 at a Toys R Us too. Toys R Us is alive and well in Canada, by the way. There's one in Halifax.
Really? Okay. Well, that's good to know.
I haven't been there in a while, but I'm pretty sure it still has a very large game section. I'll have to check.
I mean, it was like, the long aisles, it was like 2 of those. Like, this one and this one, both sides. We're talking like 50 feet long. Mm-hmm. I mean, it was huge. And Yeah, they had the Neo Geo there, which I think it was like $1,000. Games were
Wow.
like $200 each.
See, I never even remembered seeing those. I've never, like, at stores, I never saw Neo Geos or 3DOs or Jaguars. Never.
Yeah,
They just weren't in my stores. I don't know if it was a Canada thing or it was a regional thing or what, but never.
yeah, I saw them all.
I played a 3DO because a friend of mine, I think I told you about it before, his dad was very wealthy. He was an eye doctor, a really nice guy too. But his parents divorced, and he was one of those cha-ching kids, right? Like he got tons of shit from them, right? And he had a 3DO, and that's how I played it. He's also the only way I ever played this. Is not that big of a deal with the Sega Master System. He's the only person I ever knew that had a Sega Master System.
I didn't know anyone either. I have one now as an adult, but I didn't have one as a child.
I like how for the Sega Master System, they basically designed games that you could beat in 10 minutes. Like you play Golden Axe, and you're like, what? Like it's over? And there's like several games like that. Like they were just like, oh, that's long enough. 10 minutes is long enough to play an entire game. Holy shit.
Oh man, it's
I don't even remember what started us down this road.
I have a Master System. I don't think I have my Genesis anymore. I don't think I have my Sega CD anymore.
I have CD.
I have the original NES, and then I have a Super Famicom.
That's cool.
And a TurboGrafx 16.
I have a Super Famicom game, but not the actual system.
I don't have any games for it. I just wanted one.
Yeah, you can't plug it in.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I
don't know if it comes with the plugs that work in our outlets.
It may not. I have to buy a converter.
Yeah. I always liked its design way better than the Super Nintendo. It was more colorful.
Yeah.
They went with gray and purple for the Super NES, which is fine, I guess. But I when I saw the colorful counterpart, I was like, oh, that's way better.
Yeah.
What drives me nuts is I somehow lost my second Super Nintendo controller. Because, when I bought it, it came with 2 controllers, like systems did back in the day.
Yeah.
But somewhere over the years, I lost one of the controllers. And I can't understand how I could have done it. Because even though I'm not the person that never loses things, there are certain things I care so much about that I don't lose. And that would have been one of them. I just can't figure out. I don't even remember exactly when I lost it. Anyway, I guess it was Star Wars that got us onto the Star Wars, onto Disney, onto video games.
Yeah. We can always talk about video games.
Oh, yeah, I'm happy to. Still might get a show up off the ground for that at some point. We've talked about it.
Yeah. Would be nice. It's everybody's schedule is hard to coordinate.
Yeah. Because, that would involve more than just me and you. Ideally.
Right. Yeah, I'd still like to do that at some point.
Well, never say never.
Because we all have different experiences and different things that we did, and doesn't it suck that like arcades aren't a thing anymore?
I know. I loved arcades, man.
I guess technology's gotten to where the games really aren't better on arcades than they are on stuff you can play at your house. So
yeah, and I never got to go to any of those cool fancy arcades they have in the States. Like those ones where they don't let kids in and they serve alcohol and stuff. Like I would have loved to have seen.
I think they still have those.
Yeah, I would have. I've never seen one. The best arcade I was ever at was in somewhere in Virginia. I can't remember what city it was in. It wasn't Richmond. Somewhere around Williamsburg. Anyway, it was an amazing arcade. This would have been circa '97 when that stuff was still booming too. Oh my god. That was the first. That was the first time I saw. It was like the first Dead or Alive game, and I got to see like crazy big screen bouncing breaths.
Yeah,
like, this is a great game. Now that was a game I want to get. Like when games suddenly became sexy.
Yeah,
you gone from Lara Croft having like sort of like a triangle situation to like actual round breasts. You're like, holy shit!
Something that you can work with.
Sure. Some pixelated girls were pretty too, but this is a whole other level.
Yeah.
Like if you played like a Street Fighter, one of the Street Fighters that had Cammy, you could like pause her at various angles.
Oh yeah, you could pause Chun-Li and see panty shots.
Yeah. Well, sure. The Japanese made sure you had panty shots. That's just a staple of what they do. Good old fan service. But yeah, but I mean, even the crappy, dirty arcades of my youth, I miss them too.
Yeah, I wasn't. I'm not quite old enough to have experienced the really like sleazy stuff. Like, have you ever seen the movie Joysticks?
No.
You probably enjoy it for nostalgia reasons, but it's basically a.
Well, that's the other thing that I wish I could like time travel back to, which is the early '80s, right before the crash, when they were like the shit, you know?
Yeah.
Because they still, even in the '90s, when they like, you know, they were a thing again, they never regained the popularity of the early '80s. Like basically '80 to '83, arcades were like ridiculous, and they had super old primitive games, of course, but everybody loved them. It didn't matter who you were. The games were just the shit. People lined up all over the place so they could play various versions of Pac-Man and Donkey Kong and Defender and whatever else was there. Then the crash was '83, I think. '83 or '84, something like that.
Corresponded with like E.T. on the 2600, right? Or
yeah, one of the worst games of all time, which is literally has hundreds of copies buried in the desert somewhere in Arizona or somewhere like that.
Yeah, they apparently went and dug it up, and it was real.
Oh yeah, it was confirmed.
I think they may have done a documentary on that.
The guy that made the game is still proud of it because he said, like, I had to make it in 3 weeks flat.
Yeah, he did everything.
And he's like, and I did it by myself.
He did the music.
He's like, that's an achievement, and I give him credit. It is an achievement. Well, it's such a weird game, though. It's like you fall into holes and you like extend your neck or something. I don't know.
I've never played it, but I've seen footage of it.
Yeah,
it was on some movie or television show recently.
Oh man,
that was set, in that period of time. Maybe in the Goldbergs or.
Now you want to talk about an expensive retro game? That's got to be like the Holy Grail.
Yeah,
that's got to be a lot.
I wonder if those still play. The one they dug up in the.
It's hard to believe. Atari wasn't exactly known for quality, but who knows?
Yeah.
But yeah, I would love that. Like, there's so many places I like to time travel to. But like I said, one of my first like destinations would be like that, like early '80s arcade. See, check out the scene.
I had a dream I did that not too long ago.
That's nice.
It was pretty cool.
Because yeah, growing up, like the arcades I went to, yeah, some people were in them, but there was no scene.
Yeah.
It was not a scene. The closest thing to ever seen was like right around 96, 97. Sometimes when I was able to get to the arcade I knew the most, which was in the smaller mall, which we don't have anymore, which had a bowling alley, and there was an arcade in the bowling alley, and they had Street Fighter Alpha 2. And that's easily the game I was most into. And like,
there
was this whole thing where like I would like try to get the high score, and I couldn't get it because I wasn't that good. But I could at least get my name on the board, right? I could get to like 9 or 10. They'd have the top 10, and I kept getting knocked out by the same guy. And then I'd come back and I'd knock him out. And like one day we literally had a showdown and I beat him. So that's
cool.
Like, that's about as cinematic as it gets for me. It's like,
were you fighting each other?
Yeah, that's what I mean. Cool. Like I was waiting for the game, and he finished really high this time. Like he got like a really high score. He was like 5th or something. And I watched him punch in the initials. I was like, because I knew it was him. So I went up and pretty much, I don't know how I found the nerve, but I challenged him. He was older than me too. I was like 13. He was like, I don't know, 18, 19 probably. He was a lot older than me.
I remember when I first played Street Fighter 2 for the first time.
He made fun of me because I used Guy. He's like, you play as Guy? I'm like, yeah. And he's like, Guy's gay.
Is that how you pronounce it? I think we always said Guile. I think we always pronounced it.
Oh, no. This is Street Fighter Alpha. This is one of the characters that was brought over from, what was that beat 'em up? He was one of the characters from that Capcom beat 'em up that they brought over. Guy is one of them.
Not Streets.
No, it doesn't have Streets in it.
Final Fight?
Final Fight, yes. Guy is one of the Final Fight imports.
Okay.
Cody is the big guy, and Guy is like the ninja type guy. Well, anyway, yeah, that's what he said to me. I picked Guy, and he's like, Guy's gay.
And
then I beat him with Guy.
That's awesome.
Washindo.
But no, when I first played Street Fighter 2 for the first time, that was a game that like there was so many new iterations of.
Yeah. Street Fighter 2, Super Street Fighter 2, Street Fighter 2 Turbo, Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo, which was only in arcades. The only home version of that was the 3DO, which was one of the first fighting games I was obsessed with playing, and I never did.
I just remembered it kept coming out as something new. I'm like, what's different about this damn thing? But anyway, the very first, like the original version.
Yeah.
I know, it was back when you would put your coin up there and, okay, I'm next in line.
Yeah.
And I got in there and I had no idea what I was doing. And I was playing as, was it Yokozuna? Was that his name? What was the sumo wrestler guy?
E Honda,
that's right. I was playing as him and, that's all I was doing. I was just doing the arm thing, just constantly. That's all I knew how to do. And I beat like 4 or 5 guys just doing that. And
that made them mad.
Somebody finally got in there and knew what they were doing. And yeah.
Well, we found out that like that move can be beaten by that stationary kick that Chun-Li does, where she just stands and she just waves her foot. If you just move them together, the kick cancels that out. Because we did that on the home version.
I guess the leg's longer than the arms.
Yeah, because the one I played the most was the home version of Street Fighter 2 Turbo, because that's what Ryan owned. So we played a lot of that in his bedroom. But yeah.
I was always...
but yeah, a lot of my memories of playing games like that are from Ryan's bedroom, playing with him.
Mm-hmm.
It's so 90s, too. Like, I can remember, like, in early 97, because like so many kids of that age and generation... Christmas 96, Ryan got the N64, like so many kids did.
Yep.
It was all over the Christmas holidays. We were playing the shit out of Mario, and I remember like several days after Christmas being at Ryan's bedroom, and we're playing Super Mario 64, and we're playing the snow stage, the cool mountain stage, and we're actually at the point where we're just like finding new. We're not actually really trying. We're just throwing ourselves off the mountain in different ways and stuff, and we're listening to. On Ryan's like little CD player, we've got "Freak Show" by Silverchair playing, and the song "Lie to Me" we really enjoyed. So we had "Lie to Me" playing on a loop while we played this while we were running around. So I have like memories of like just that "Lie to Me" song, which is only like a minute and a half long. It's a super fast, short song. We had that on a loop while we were running around on Cool Mountain, like tossing ourselves into oblivion. So it's a good memory.
That's before GoldenEye, right?
Yeah, that's a little bit. Yeah, that's about a year or two before GoldenEye, which changed everything.
Yeah.
But anyway, don't want to go too long.
One of those systems where when they did the 3D, well, it works really well, but there were so many like third-party games that looked like trash on there and didn't play well. The controls are all messed up.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Played a lot of those. But yeah, that changed everything. That was like sleepover. All our sleepovers, that's all it was.
Oh, man.
I just slogged, like at junior high, I just slogged through like 5 days of school so I could get to the weekend and have sleepovers with Ryan and Matthew and stuff and just like play like GoldenEye for like 48 hours.
It's so long, man. That game you could play for so long.
Yep. And I never owned it. Never owned a 64. But
I never did either. But
there was a point where one of my friends I swapped, where for about 3 months I swapped the 64 for the PlayStation. We did a little trade. So I got to. That's how I played Ocarina of Time.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's not the type of game you can really play with your friends. They're gonna get stuff like I before that I would watch Ryan play, but I mean until right now, Breath of Wild, Ocarina of Time was the only Zelda game I ever put any real time into. But that game they released on the 3DS not too long ago is the first Zelda I ever beat too. Felt really good about that. I can't remember what it's called. It's from a couple years ago. I finally got it when it dropped price finally for like a greatest hits version. But anyway, it's from a couple years ago. It's a 3DS version. This 3DS game.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of the name of it. I can't. I've never been a huge Zelda guy.
No, me neither. But Breath of the Wild is amazing, and I'm replaying that right now, actually, which is funny. Breath
is
of the
that
Wild.
The newest one?
Yeah, that's the Switch one. That world is incredible.
Oh,
it's like Ocarina of Time times like 10. We'll put it that way. Like, because I don't know, like I didn't get to much time with games after that to really say how good the worlds were, but I don't know. Anyway, we do a lot of video game talk, and I don't mind doing that, but we'll try to get back here.
Hone it back in.
So, just not even just to necessarily the film itself, but the filmmaker Alfonso Cuarón. As I said, I've actually seen all his films except for his debut way back in 1991. And I have to say, like, all his films, I mean, with maybe the exception of Harry Potter, because that's, adapting a very popular franchise, they all have, like, this thing in common. It sounds kind of stupid because movies are about people. Like 99% of movies are about people. Sometimes you have movies about animals or animatronic animals, but most movies are about people. But I would just say like humanity itself is like a big sort of recurring theme in his movies, sort of like the nature of humanity. So he did A Little Princess in 1995, which is not really a well-known movie, but was always a book I really liked as a kid around the same time. And it's a nice movie. I don't know if you know. It's one of those movies that's more or less sort of for little girls. It's during World War I, and there's this girl who's like, it's kind of almost like an Annie situation. She has like a hard knock life living in some sort of like orphanage or something, and there's this whole thing about how she finds out like her dad is actually like, I don't know, somebody royal or something. Anyway.
Oh yeah, I have seen that.
Yeah,
I didn't realize that was him.
But yeah, that was his first, I guess, American movie. Anyway, I always liked that movie. I haven't seen it in a lot of years, but it's a nice movie. It's a nice adaptation of a pretty good book, a book that a lot of people of a certain age read. The 1998 Great Expectations is an odd movie. Because obviously there are many different adaptations of the famous novel Great Expectations. This is the one that has Ethan Hawke and Gwyneth Paltrow in it. And it's weird, but I can't really put on my finger how it's weird. Like, because I mean, like any movie that adapts a novel, it's gonna like change some things or leave out some things. And this movie's choices for that are odd, I have to say. And I think he changes the name. Oh yeah, and all the characters have different names. So even though it's called Great Expectations, but it's not like actually like, you know, Pip and and Isabella or whatever her name is and Miss Havisham. It's different characters in slightly different situations. It's kind of like a reimagining of Great Expectations, but they kept the title anyway, type thing. I think they also tried to make it a bit more sexy and erotic because that was kind of like a fad going on at that time, like the late '90s stuff.
Yeah, like Cruel Intentions.
Yeah,
stuff like that.
So this is actually, I think, this is actually set like in America, like way down near Mexico somewhere. And instead of Pip, we have a kid named Finn, but it's the same sort of thing. Like he meets a convict and he helps them and stuff, and I don't know. But then like okay, Estella's the name of the girl, but so that wasn't changed. I'm just looking up now because Estella's from the original novel. Okay, so they do actually have an Estella, so I guess she is Estella. But it's hard. Actually, I really need to re-watch it now because I forget so much. But it's it was part of like that wave of movies from the '90s that did like sort of weird loose adaptation, like really loose adaptations of classic literature, or not even just loose. Sometimes they were loose, or sometimes they were just really stylized because like Romeo and Juliet.
Yeah,
right?
that's what I was going to say.
Because Romeo and Juliet is word for word.
Mm-hmm.
It's the text. It's not an adaptation, but it's an adaptation of the setting. So they were doing all sorts of stuff like that in like the mid to late '90s with some of these classic things. And Great Expectations was kind of just one more that sort of fell by the wayside. But I don't know. I remember liking it.
I never saw it. I remember it looking quite different than the book because I had actually read the book at that point. So
yeah, because again, it's not set in 19th century England, right? It's a very different setting, and it has like sort of a almost like there's definitely some Mexican like influence to the movie, which makes sense, I guess, given the director.
He is Mexican?
Yeah, he's Mexican.
I was going to say, man, like, you said he directed the Harry Potter movie, and I looked, and who saw Tu Mama Tambien and said, hey, we needed this guy.
Yeah, right? So that's the other one. So Tu Mama Tambien, that a coming of age, a completely like Mexican movie, and a coming of age movie about two teenage boys that run off with like a mysterious, sexy woman and have their own sexual awakening and blah 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 with her, which is a cool movie. It's one of those road movies, coming of age. It's a good movie, but yeah, who saw that and was like, yeah,
we need to get this guy to direct a YA movie.
Yeah, you're up next for the third entry of this thing. Actually,
pretty early on in his career too. I mean, he hadn't done a whole lot. I mean, I guess probably Great Expectations is probably what.
Well, let's see here. I have a thing here that says. So obviously, the first two films have been directed by Chris Columbus, and at the time, and even though a lot of different people directed the movies over the years, I remember at the time, everybody assumed he was just going to direct all of them. when they were going to make the third movie, everybody assumed it would just be Chris Columbus again. Well, let's see. He decided not to return because it was basically it was so much work and he had barely had any free time for 2 years. So let's see. He remains as a producer. So here's why they approached Guillermo del Toro.
Why?
And he wasn't interested.
Sure.
He wasn't interested. And then somebody named, who's Mark Foster? I know that, buddy. But anyway, he was filming Finding Neverland, so he turned it down. They considered M. Night Shyamalan. Thank God he was working on that Bomb the Village, because we don't want to see him doing that. Then Warner Brothers then composed a 3-name shortlist for Columbus' replacement. One of them was Kenneth Branagh, which is funny because he was in the second one as an actor. An eventual selection, and for some reason, somebody named Callie Curry, Kenneth Branagh, and Alfonso Cuarón. Cuarón was initially nervous about accepting, as he had not read any of the books or seen the films. After reading the series, he changed his mind and signed on to direct. Okay, so that doesn't explain at all how they selected him. But Cuarón's appointment pleased J.K. Rowling, who loved his film, Y tu mamá también.
Oh, wow.
So J.K. Rowling liked the movie, even though it has nothing to do with her own books.
Isn't she like a Mormon or something?
No, she's not. I was impressed with his adaptation of A Little Princess. So that's why. Rowling herself liked his work. Tonally and stylistically, he was the perfect fit. I mean, I guess so, because the third movie is a solid movie. It's a good... I mean, I don't think any of the Harry Potters are bad, but...
We need more sex scenes with Harry Potter.
Oh, don't worry.
Kid.
Yeah. There's some great...
They can run a train on the other girl.
Yeah. There's that whole epic thing about that chick. Nobody knows if it's like for real or if it's like the best troll job in the world, but there was this chick. She was a crazy popular fanfic writer who either this is all made up crap or she was just some fat ugly girl that like was obsessed with goth culture because she described herself basically as looking like because remember this is the early 2000s. She said that she would describe herself as looking like the chick from Evanescence.
Oh, come on. Yeah, I know you're talking about.
Only with her hair dyed or something. Anyway, she wrote like this crazy... you can still probably find it. I can't remember what it's called, but she wrote this crazy epic fanfic about Harry Potter that was very sexualized. But what was hilarious was because she wasn't even alone in this. There were a whole bunch of people that hate Ron Weasley, like hate him, especially girls that don't find him sexy enough to fit into the world. So not only do they like change it to this is one of the ones. She's not the only one, but they do this. But she had this whole thing where it actually turned out that Ron Weasley, and she would often emphasize how ugly and stupid he was, but also was actually like a Death Eater in disguise, and like how Hermione like hated him and spit on him, and that Malfoy was actually a good guy, and he was always wearing leather pants and stuff. It's hilarious. But yeah, I'll have to look her up sometime. But I still have no idea if what she did was like an amazing troll job or if she was like for real. But she wrote ridiculous fan fiction based on those sorts of premises, full of sex scenes and stuff. And the best part was like it just went out of its way to trash Ron because they thought Ron was ugly, and because they thought Ron was ugly, they made him like the worst, most hateful character imaginable. And they made Draco Malfoy a secret hero because he was hot.
A fat goth girl in the early 2000s. I've probably met her at some point.
Yeah. I'm only guessing that's what... I mean, she was a goth girl. Maybe she was... I have a hard time believing she was as pretty as she said she was, I just don't believe that's true.
Yeah.
And now look what we got. Like, Twilight basically came from that, and so did...
That's the Mormon I was thinking of, I think.
Yeah, she's the Mormon. And then, of course, what is it, 50 Shades of Grey started as Twilight fanfic.
Really?
Yep.
Wow.
So that's the world we live in now. These are best-selling authors.
Yeah.
Like, tell me why I don't just throw myself off the bridge every day trying to be a writer in this world.
Need to sex it up. But in a like nonchalant way for the ladies.
As his first exercise with the actors, this is Cuarón directing Prisoner of Azkaban. The actors who play the central trio, so that's, Ron, Hermione, and Harry. Cuarón assigned Radcliffe, Grint, and Watson to write an autobiographical essay about their character, written in the first person, spanning birth to the discovery of the magical world, and including the character's emotional experience. That seems kind of like a dick thing to do. They've already played the character for 2 movies, and he's thinking they can't. Of Rupert Grint's essay, Quaron recalls, Rupert didn't deliver the essay. When I questioned why he didn't do it, he said, "I'm Ron. Ron wouldn't do that." So I said, "Okay, you understand your character."
Oh God, come on! Give me a fucking break.
But the fact, like, why would he make them do that? They already played the characters for 2 movies, and he's here playing head games with them. I don't know.
Well, it's like fuck you, recast me. You know, like I'm locked into this role.
Yeah. That was the most important piece of acting that we did on it, because it was very clear that everything they put in their essays was going to be the pillars they were going to hold onto the rest of the process. I'm like, give me a break, dude. Anyway, so he's an interesting guy with an interesting approach. Yeah. And then, of course, he had 3 big critical hits all in a row, although they're spaced out by years. Children of Men, Gravity, and Roma. I'm going to come right out and say I don't like Gravity. It has nice effects, and it was a fun experience in the theater, but I have no desire to ever watch it again, ever. And then when you read and find out all the fucking scientific and factual errors in it, it's just annoying, because it seems like this is one of those movies where they're supposed to go out of the way to make it really realistic, and they didn't. So
I'm trying to remember. I'm getting that confused with Interstellar. This is the one with Sandra Bullock, right?
Sandra Bullock, yeah.
And she's basically just trapped out in the space.
Yeah, okay. There's some sort of malfunction, and she's trapped. She has to figure out a way to get back to Earth. It's like a survival story. It reads a lot kind of like a Michael Crichton thing, where there's like, here's a problem, got to solve the problem. Another problem has popped up. That's like Michael Crichton's bread and butter, right? People are trying to work on a problem to solve it, and they're going to solve it, but then another problem pops up, which spawns 5 other problems, and yeah. Anyway, people still love Gravity, but I just don't really get much out of it. It was a good movie to see in the theater because the way it looked and everything, but I don't think it has any rewatchability. I am not a Sandra Bullock fan. I don't dislike her. I'm not anti Sandra Bullock, but she has a massive, super, super loyal fan base that adore her and everything she does, and that's fine. But I mean, it seemed to hit its peak at Gravity.
She's oh shit, I'm blanking on the name. The Stallone movie.
Oh, yeah, she's funny in that.
She's good in that.
She's really funny in that movie. Demolition Man.
Demolition Man.
Yeah, she's very funny in that movie, I have to say. She's got some good comedic chops. Of course, the movie itself is ridiculous, so it's easy. But yeah, she's really funny in that movie. Her scenes with Stallone are ridiculous. Let's have cyber virtual sex.
Yeah, he's like, man, I just had sex with my daughter.
Did she turn out to be his daughter?
No. Oh, okay. That's a theory, though.
That would have been funny.
Yeah. No, I didn't really care for Gravity either. It was fine, but
yeah. And I liked Roma a lot, but I don't think it was amazing, but I liked it.
Yeah, you said it was kind of overrated.
I think it's overrated, but I understand why, because it's not the sort of movie that gets a lot of attention usually. It's about a different sort of type of person in a different sort of situation. So it's important that it tells that kind of story, I think, is more.
See, this is when Scorsese came out and said he doesn't think that
Netflix
movies should be considered for Oscars.
Actually, Spielberg said that, I think.
Oh, Spielberg. Okay, one of those guys.
Scorsese's the one that hates Marvel movies and says that there are amusement park rides.
They're all, saying shit like that now.
And they don't take any chances. And I'm going to talk shit again. I would love to see the chances he takes in The Irishman, a movie about gangsters that has Robert De Niro. That must take incredible chances from the normal stuff he did. He must have really taken a departure, gotten out of his comfort zone. He's doing really crazy, weird, experimental stuff with The Irishman. I'm sorry.
He needs to let his fucking editor do his job and cut that goddamn rundown down.
Everybody says it's too long. I don't care. I have no desire to watch it.
I'll watch it, but not in one sitting. That's too damn long for a movie, man. That's 3.5 hours is not a feature. That's 2 films.
I don't know. I'm one of those people that thinks movies can be as long as they have to be, but if it doesn't have to be, then don't do it. And what I'm hearing is everybody saying you could easily cut 40 minutes from it. That doesn't sound like the mark of a good movie to me, that you could take 40 whole fucking minutes out of it. But anyway, I know how I'm coming across. I'm a butthurt fanboy, blah, blah. I'm not. I don't care what he says about movies, but I think he sounds ridiculous, is all I'm saying. Especially that whole thing about not taking chances. Nothing is risked. Like, what risk is he taking? All he does is make the same movies over and over again. They're good quality movies. I'm not saying they're shit or anything.
I wouldn't go that far, but I mean, I think the guy's a good director, but yeah,
I mean, he already did Goodfellas, and then he did Casino, and now he's doing a movie about Jimmy Hoffa with De Niro. It's the same thing.
I don't even think that damn film is playing here. Not at my local theater.
No, it's not playing anywhere, but you can watch it on Netflix. So.
Oh, really? It's on Netflix?
Yeah.
The Irishman?
Yeah, go watch it right now.
Oh, I didn't realize that. Okay. So
there's like an hour and a half long thing about the Irishman where he just sits around with De Niro and they basically suck each other off about it. I did watch a few minutes of that, and it's just them talking about how great it is to work together and how great they are and how great everything is. And I'm just thinking, you'll be dead soon.
Yeah, both of them will be.
I mean, at least De Niro has taken risks in his career, but I do not think Scorsese has. And I know I'm really harping on one little thing he said, but I mean, it seems like a big thing to me.
Didn't he do 10-10? Was that him?
No, Spielberg.
Spielberg, okay.
That's funny. I just started watching the cartoon that I used to watch again because that's on Amazon Prime right now. So I've just started watching those again. Yeah. See, I didn't understand like why the Tintin movie bombed until I found out like most Americans didn't know what Tintin was.
Right.
I mean, I guess most Canadians wouldn't either if not for that cartoon because it's not like I knew the comics growing up. Or I own a bunch of the comics now. But yeah, the day before yesterday, I started watching the cartoon again because that was another thing that came on Family Channel. But again, not in the U.S. I guess only the Canadian version. I guess it was called Disney Channel in the U.S. and it's called Family Channel here.
Mm-hmm. Which is odd because we had another channel called Family Channel.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Yeah, it's odd.
Because, yeah, when I was talking to Eric about it, he said he remembered having Family Channel. And I was like, I thought you called it Disney Channel. So, yeah, I'm really confused.
It was the Family Channel. Then it became ABC Family.
And I've heard of ABC Family. Yeah.
It's changed names a couple of times, but it was originally the Family Channel.
Yeah.
There was
for whatever reason, Canadian Disney Channel was Family Channel, and it did have slightly different programming. I mean, mostly it was the same, but it had a few different things in it, and I guess that's one of them. It had some really weird shit in there too, like Zoobly Zoo. You know what that is? Okay, think about like the musical Cats, but with a bunch of whole different animals, and then make a stupid show about it. That was Zoobly Zoo. Like people dressed up like theatrically as animals, but they're obviously people, but they're being animals anyway. Speaking of Cats, which is a pretty good musical, that movie looks like an abomination. Like that looks like a crime against nature. What they're doing, like the costumes were fine. Don't CGI like their bodies into. It looks unholy and terrifying. Isn't that coming out on Christmas?
Is it, man? I feel like they've done a lot of reshoots or something on that because I know they released a trailer like over a year ago.
Because it's grotesque and terrifying.
We've been talking shit about it for quite a long time.
Yeah. And again, I like the subject matter. I like cats, and I'm one of those people that can buy that. I saw that as a kid even. I don't mind a bunch of people prancing around dressed as cats, even though they obviously just look like people with fur and in no way cats. I don't mind that. I'm fine with it. But to like CGI it into people so they become these unholy cat mutant monsters, I'm not fine with that. I mean, but Cats is a good musical. It has some good songs in it and stuff and some fun moments, but I'm not going to go see that.
Have you ever heard of a show called Life Goes On?
I've heard of the title, yeah.
It's it has a Down syndrome guy as the lead.
Oh, that
Corky.
sounds... Yeah, the only reason I know what that is because of Family Guy references to it.
I think that came on Family Channel.
Yeah,
and it was also another show with Wilford Brimley that was on Family Channel. I didn't really watch that stuff too much, but
completely different Family Channel for sure. Because my Family Channel was basically Disney Channel. It did not have anything resembling a sitcom. Nothing like a sitcom at all. But definitely some weirdness, and I guess a little bit of Canadian programming because that's how I saw Tintin. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Tintin was on a different channel. Maybe I'm just thinking it was Family Channel. Maybe Tintin came on the Canadian channel.
Yeah, because it definitely wasn't. It's not a Disney thing, right?
No, but not everything on Family Channel was Disney.
That's my dog. Kenny says "That's My Dog" was on Family Channel. That name sounds familiar.
Again, that's the other Family Channel, not mine.
Right.
I mean, I remember some truly bizarre sitcoms, but they were on different things. Like, speaking of dogs, did you ever see? I can't remember what it's called now. Dog House, about the guy that turned into the dog.
No, I don't think so.
Okay, so that's another channel I used to have. I don't know what channel it was on. So there's a sitcom about a guy who was like so he was a cop and he had a dog partner, and then like he crashed his car into a telephone pole and like lightning hit it, and then he and the dog switched bodies, and then the dog in his body died, and they had a funeral for him, but he was alive in the dog, and the dog was adopted by his brother's family. But the parents don't know he's there, but the kids know that he's there. So the kids know that their Uncle Digby is actually this St. Bernard. What's hilarious is they dub over a voice talking to the dog. And I guess they must have just filled the dog's mouth with peanut butter, because the dog just goes...
Oh, God, yeah. Mr. Ed style.
Yeah, and what's weird is, like, even though he's a human in a dog's body, they make it clear, like, he's given over to being a dog, because often he talks about, like, wanting to date poodles and stuff like that. And it was called Doghouse, and I can't remember the theme song, but always ended to go, "Digby's in the doghouse." Dun, 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 dun. That's how low the fucking sitcoms could get that I've seen. Let me see if I can find what channel that was on.
Oh, man,
and he had like a weird like PI type voice too. He was like, he was kind of like doing like a low rent Sam Spade type thing.
Yeah, see?
Very similar to that. I wonder if I can find that on YouTube.
Man, we could make a show on weird ass shows in the 80s. Like we could do an entire new show on it, because it's so like Small Wonder.
Yeah. That show freaked me out. I was actually afraid of her.
They did Harry and the Hendersons was a sitcom. What else? Oh man, I had a whole list of these a while back.
Yeah, this was a Canadian show. Oh my God, you have to watch this intro. Here, hold on. I'll do it on Twitter, I guess. This is yeah. Oh my God. So glad I found this. There. Now life is complete. But yeah, I mean, so that's a terrible... and again, I was a young kid watching this, and I was still fully aware how fucking stupid it was.
Yeah.
Like, I wasn't like, oh boy, Doghouse is on. Yeah. I was like, well, let's watch this crap. This is when I was like 7, 8 years old. I was like, yeah, okay. Let's do this.
It sounds like Shaggy Dog or something.
Yeah. And again, that's a movie that I saw because of Family Channel. And I saw its weird unofficial 70s sequel, The Shaggy D.A.
Yeah. Didn't they actually make that into a feature, or a new feature with like Tim Allen or something? Like a decade ago?
Oh, Tim Allen. Yeah, they did. They did. That was a weird period too, where like Disney had Tim Allen by the balls and made him do whatever they wanted. Like, just keep making Christmas movies, Tim Allen.
Santa Claus, yeah.
Make more Christmas movies.
The thing is, that guy got like filthy rich off of that stuff.
Anyway, that's a lot of fun reminiscing. But I've come to, as I said, back when this movie had all that buzz and stuff, I didn't see it in the theater, and then I didn't think too much of it. And then I saw it maybe a year or two down the road, and I didn't think it was that good, but I returned to it a few years later, and I liked it more. And I don't know how many times I've seen it over the years, but I've seen it a couple times, and I've come to appreciate it more and more. And again, I think a lot has to do with because I really appreciate the technical aspects of stuff too, the stylistic choices, the long shots, some of the background details that aren't even necessarily that important, but I like. It's cool because it's a dystopian future, but as we said, it's much more sort of restrained and realistic. It feels like something that could really happen. It's not full of weird technology or zombie hordes or a killer plague or anything. It's just sort of people dealing with a crisis, and it parallels a lot of stuff that has happened in history and was happening at the time. There's, some post 9/11 paranoia going on in the movie. What else? Other stuff too. I don't know. As we said, it was like sort of right when Clive Owen was actually becoming a really prominent actor. Pretty good role for him. It's funny that somebody suggested like somebody else playing the role. It's not like a role that necessarily needs a specific actor because the whole point is he's an everyman, but it seemed like just sort of the right sort of timing for him. Plus, it's good that he was an English guy. It's a movie set in England, so why not? It's a little too bad that Julianne Moore's character is killed so quickly. I understand why they did it, but it would have been interesting to reveal a bit more about her. Julianne Moore can usually pull off anything she's given. She's, a pretty adaptable actress. She's not one of those actresses that just plays one part or one type of thing. She's more adaptable than a lot of actresses, or at least given the opportunity to be more adaptable. Because I do feel like there's a lot of actresses, especially, fairly attractive ones, where it's like, here, play this role over and over again because that's what you're good at. And maybe they could act more if they actually got the fucking chance and they're not given. Julianne Moore often was given good opportunities, I think. Either that or maybe it has less to do with what she was given and what she accepted. Maybe some of these actresses were offered better, more interesting roles and they turned it down for safer roles. I don't know. But the point is, Julianne Moore is pretty good at stepping into different situations. She's not, just the hot love interest or whatever. And as she got older, she's one of the few actresses that transitioned pretty well into getting older too. I mean, even in this movie, she's not old, but she's not young either. She's kind of in the middle. But it is pretty cool, like especially the first time you're watching, seeing her die, because you're like, holy shit, like that's a major character. I didn't think she was going to die. As we said, sort of a different type of role for Michael Caine to play, kind of an old, burnt-out hippie type guy. Some people call this a political thriller. I suppose it is. I don't think of it that way. I think of it just more as some sort of a dystopian drama.
Yeah.
Probably better. I mean, obviously it has lots of political overtones and the situation is political, but I don't know. It's still not the words I would use for describing it.
It's like you said, it's more of a reflection on humanity than a political thing.
Exactly. I think, yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Sorry. Oh, I had written down the name of that damn guard. His name was Sid. So Sid was the guard that talked about himself in the third person, who was eventually killed with a car battery. Good old Sid. And yeah, and we said I really like the sequences, that like the one-shot sequences. They fit the tone of the movie very well. And while the movie is really depressing and stuff, it ends on sort of a hopeful note. And of course, once the credits start to roll, you get the sound of children playing and laughing. So it's kind of like a hint that they're gonna figure out something here, that the human project is not bullshit, that they'll actually be able to extrapolate some sort of cure or something from Key. And of course, you have the wraparound that she decides to name her daughter Dylan, which was the name of the son that died. But it is just a very interesting world, this world without children, this world where people are facing it in different ways. Like some people think, well, humanity's done, so it doesn't matter what we do.
Right.
And that seems to be how most countries dealt with it. England is like one of the last countries just barely hanging on. But what if they got this crazy police state that's practically Nazi Germany, and it's only getting worse. So that's the other thing. Because at one point when he's having the conversation with Jasper even says something to the effect of, like, the world has gotten so bad that even if we find a cure, and even that they start getting births, we're already fucked. Like, we can't just, that isn't going to fix everything. And maybe he's right. So there's, some ambiguity there. You could believe that, okay, maybe people start getting born again, but Jesus Christ, like, look at what happened to the world. It's going to be a long climb back to any sort of stability.
Right.
So, we talk about this a lot, but, it's the type of movie where the ending still leaves a lot of things that you can think about because they aren't necessarily spelled out for you. So that's pretty cool. It's not entirely ambiguous. Of course, since we're doing full spoilers here, we forgot to say that also as part of the hero's journey for our Theo, he does actually not survive it. He dies. We find out, and you can tell, you actually see it happen, but he doesn't react, right? Is that when he goes back into the building trying to find her after they got separated, he runs into Luke again, and Luke explains why he had to do what he had to do, and he's saying, we need the baby. Anyway, when he starts to run from Luke, Luke actually does get a shot off at him before Luke gets hit by an explosion, and we find out that he did hit him, and that he was mortally wounded. But he made it all the way to the boat with her, and then he dies in the boat, which is sad, but it's a good character arc. Actually, in the book, he lives. So it's quite a departure from the book in some ways. They made some very big changes. Probably the biggest being, I don't even think Key's character is in the book. And you're like, what? Isn't the whole thing about her? But or at least her character is very different or something like that. I don't know. Anyway, some sort of departure. And even though we said this movie's full of like some religious imagery and religious references, actually the book is more religious. So, and some people criticized it for downplaying some of that, but I don't know. I think it's cool to have religious references and imagery and stuff, but you don't want to be preachy and deliver any sort of specifically religious message. And I think the movie does a good job of skirting that. Like, it has its religious symbols and stuff, but it doesn't like make any sort of religious statement, which I think is really the best way of going about telling most stories. So I like it for that. So yeah, so that's Children of Men 2006. Any final thoughts for you before we finish up here?
I don't think so. I think we pretty much covered everything. It's honestly, I'm not the biggest fan of this film. I mean, I think it's well done and everything, just not personally. It's just not something that I'm getting a lot out of. But that's just me personally. It is a well done film.
Yeah, I like Alfonso Cuarón a lot. I like his movies, and he seems to take some time in between projects. So I don't know when we'll see his next movie, but I'm interested in it. But I really want to see Great Expectations again because I barely remember it. But that's I remember sort of like a fad movie. It was kind of almost like a fad, like I said, in like the late 90s to have sort of like loose or stylistically different adaptations of some classic literature. There's definitely more. Actually, what's funny is Ethan Hawke is in this. Ethan Hawke is also in what's sometimes known as corporate Hamlet. Remember Hamlet from 2000? I like that Hamlet. It's not great or anything. But it's an interesting thing. So yeah, so that's like a modern day. That's a Hamlet set modern day. Instead of his father being a king, instead he's like the head of this company, but the company's kind of crooked and there might be ties to organized crime. And I actually like that movie because it has internal monologues. So like, you know how like in the play, of course, you would have monologues where the character would just blah, blah, blah out to the world. In this, they made it internal, so it's not spoken, it's just thought. And the whole to be or to not to be speech is given while our Hamlet character, Ethan Hawke, is strolling through a Blockbuster.
Oh,
wow. Bill Murray's in it as Polonius, which is pretty different because he's not trying to be funny or anything. Yeah. It's just Bill Murray as Polonius, or the Polonius character. Chris Cooper is the bad guy, the evil uncle, which is kind of different. Or is that who I mean? No, not Chris Cooper. The guy that was Agent Cooper in Twin Peaks. Not Chris Cooper. Chris Cooper's that evil smarmy guy.
Oh, Kyle MacLachlan?
Kyle MacLachlan is the evil uncle Claudius in this Hamlet. So I'd like to see that again too. So that came out in 2000. So again, that was, I think Julia Stiles was Ophelia. I don't remember who was who, but and I can't. One of them was an actor I don't know, but one of the two of Rosencrantz and Guildenstern was actually what's his name? I talk about him all the time. Steve Zahn. Steve Zahn is one of Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, which is kind of cool. So that's a movie I haven't seen in a long time either, but I always really like that movie. I understand it's gimmicky and but I like it, you know. So that was part of that wave too. So there was a few movies from the late 90s into about 2000 where they did some stuff with some classic literature, whether it was a Shakespeare play or Great Expectations or something like that. I don't know. Most of them, maybe they're not great, but I like them. So anyway, so I'd like to watch that again, and I'll probably watch the Netflix one again too. It's not great or anything, but it's certainly worth a watch. And I understand why people like it because it's a different sort of perspective because it's a Mexican story about like ethnic Mexicans and a certain part of history that maybe a lot of people aren't aware of. But anyway, so that'll wrap it up before I just repeat myself a whole bunch of times. But so there we go. That was once again repeating myself. Children of Men, 2006, a pretty cool dystopian movie. And yeah, so we're not tied to any series right now, so we're just doing whatever we feel like going into the new year for the next while. We have a few movies that we've tentatively talked about that are possible, but we don't know yet, so we can't say for sure. But anyway, as we said, we're trying to maintain being productive here and not skip any weeks, even as we go into Christmas season. Even though it's a busy time, we're going to try to make sure that we can get some episodes going here, because that's what we want to do heading into 2020. So thanks a lot for being with us. So that will do for tonight. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, guys.
All right, and for the ending note, the piece of so I'll leave you with the piece of graffiti from early in the movie, which is "Last one to die. Please turn the lights out."